Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Subcommittee on Government Operations, a subcommittee of the House Government Oversight and Reform Committee. Pleased to welcome members, and the title of today's hearing is Examining Solutions to Close the $106 billion Improper Payments Gap. The order of business will be today that we'll have opening statements by members, and we have one panel of witnesses. We'll recognize them, swear them in, and they will provide the committee with their statements, and then we'll go to questions after we've completed hearing from the witnesses assembled today. Again, thank everyone for participating and attending. This is an important topic, and actually part of the Oversight Committee's mission, and that's to accomplish two fundamental responsibilities. A lot of hardworking Americans send their taxpayer dollars here to Washington. They deserve to know how that money is spent. They need to make certain that our government operates efficiently, economically. And our responsibility in this committee and its predecessors back to the early 1800s is to protect those citizen rights and hold folks accountable in the federal government. So that's the reason we're here today, and the purpose of this hearing is one in a series of hearings that we've had on improper payments, and this is an update hearing. I'll start by yielding to myself, and I have some opening comments. Then we'll go to, as I said, the other members. First of all, again, we're going to discuss a very serious and unfortunately a very persistent problem of improper payments across the federal government. Now listen to this. The amounts here are absolutely staggering. But just in fiscal year 2013, agencies reported over $100 billion in improper payments. I asked the staff to go back and see how consistent this has been. Has it changed much? And actually, it's over $100 billion each of the last 5 years. That's a staggering $500 billion in improper payments at a time when we're running trillions of dollars of deficit, and that we're scrambling to try to do the best we can to make, again, federal fiscal ends meet. It's an incredible amount of money that has been misappropriated and mispaid with improper payments. Let me take just a minute and review some of the staggering statistics. The sheer number award has to go to CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which paid out, again, a huge amount of money. I think about $60 billion of the $100 billion is just in. Let's put this little chart that we've got up here. This chart says it all, and the chart shows Medicare, Medicare Advantage, and Medicaid. You add them up, and you have about $60 billion total improper payments out of about $100 billion. So in sheer dollars alone, one of the areas that concerns me is, and every American, is health care and the staggering cost of health care. And here we have improper payments to the tune of over $60 billion in just those programs. Now, that sets the dollar record. However, one of my major concerns is the improper payment error rate. And the chart here, the red, shows the error rate. And soaring off the charts, the error rate for earned income tax credit, and that is overseen by IRS. So it's about 25% error rate in the earned income tax credit area. That's astounding. A quarter of these improper payments are done through, again, error. The error rate is less for in the healthcare. That's the only thing I guess we could say good about again, the huge amount of dollars going out from that area. So IRS, and we've asked them to join us today and talk about their progress or lack of progress, where they are in trying to get this huge error rate under control. There are many examples, and I'll put some of the record, some of them in the record. I won't cover all of them today, but for example, if you want to go back to healthcare, CMS has paid individuals who are incarcerated in correctional facilities, so individuals in prison behind bars who are generally not eligible for health care benefits. They paid some $33 million between 2009 and 2011 to people behind bars. That's just a Medicare program. If we look at some of the other areas where money is going out the door, in my state, a mother of three with a sixth grade education defrauded the federal government out of at least $3 million with an identity theft tax fraud scheme. She was caught because she announced on her Facebook page that she was, quote, the queen of IRS tax fraud. And I've also conducted hearings on the issue of identity theft and tax fraud that occurs through that scheme. Improper payments are one of the most important areas in our committee's jurisdiction, and one of which Congress has been very active. It's not like Congress hasn't acted on the issue of improper payments. Now listen to this. 12 years ago, we passed the Improper Payments Information Act, which requires agencies to do basic reporting to the White House Office of Management and Budget to address the so-called improper payments, which included overpayments, underpayments, payments to the wrong individuals, and payments where there's no documentation. That's 12 years ago. 4 years ago, we passed the Improper Payments Elimination and Recovery Act, which requires agencies to produce plans to reduce the payment errors and attempt to recoup improper paid funds. 2 years ago, we passed the Improper Payments Elimination and Recovery Improvement Act, which created a do not pay initiative to prevent fraud and payments to deceased individuals and strengthen agencies' abilities to recover improperly paid taxpayer dollars. In fiscal year 2013, the total estimated improper payments were $105 billion, over $105 billion, according to the GAO's review of agency reports. So today we're going to hear from GAO and OMB. Unfortunately, the picture hasn't gotten much better, even with the passage of a number of laws that I cited. The Department of Defense, let's talk about them for a second. While DOD does a report, and they have found that a relatively small number of improper payments are made, it's important to note that GAO's total improper payments figure does not include the Department of Defense. GAO has grave reservations even about DOD's ability to track and accurately report its improper payments. Now, back to Medicare and Medicaid and CMS, which is responsible also for many high-error programs. including the program with the highest amount of improper payments, and that's Medicare fee-for-service. In fiscal year 2013, roughly 10%, or $36 billion of payments were made by Medicare fee-for-service, and those were improper payments that were made. The IRS, again, administers the Earned Income Tax Credit. They do have one of the highest rates, as I said, about 25%, and the second highest number of improper payments in total dollars. Again, a smaller number of dollars, but a higher error rate. Their payments, improper payments, are $14.5 billion in the last fiscal year. IRS also faces a grappling problem with increased identity theft, and I mentioned that before. And again, the estimates we have from IRS indicate that that could run as high as $21 billion in fraudulent tax returns through 2017. Finally, I am pleased to see all of our witnesses, particularly pleased to see IRS Commissioner Koskinen. I had actually invited Deborah Holland, the head of IRS Wage and Investment Division, to testify today. Mr. Koskinen, who heads IRS, has agreed to come at his own volition, and pleased to have him here. I may, in fact, call Deborah Holland back when I put her and the agency on notice. While I'm glad he's here, we'll have an opportunity to question him. But I may, again, continue this hearing with her at a future date. And given the Commissioner's broad responsibility, he does open himself to questions not only about this, but a whole host of IRS issues that have been before this committee. So I look forward to hearing from IRS, CMS, GAO, OMB, on how best we can tackle this problem that seems to be eliminating resolution and not getting better. In fact, the dollars are very concerning. So with that opening comment, I'll yield to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conley.
I thank my friend. Before I start, if the chairman of the full committee has an opening statement, I would certainly defer to him. He
does, and we can, with your permission.
I would defer to the chairman.
You came late, and we're going to recognize Mr. Isa, the chairman of the full committee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Conley. Commissioner, welcome. Ms. Davis, I want to signal you out for an excellent report that I know these take time and they're hard to put together. What I got out of your report, what I hope the Commissioner is prepared to talk about today, is an amount of money that the American people cannot begin to understand. More than 100 years of giving away $1 million a day somehow, causes people, or more than 1,000 years of giving away $1 million a day. It represents such a large amount of money that nobody can really understand what it would be like to just stack up those bills that long. But normally when we have these kinds of hearings, everyone comes in and everyone says, if you just gave us more money, we could fix that. Commissioner, consider it said that if we gave you lots more money, in addition to the $11 billion budget, $1.8 billion for IT, and 90,000 employees, with more people, you could, in fact, reduce some of this. One of the challenges is, ultimately, that slide that the Chairman Mica put up represents self-inflicted wounds in addition to fraud. There is no reason that earned income credit, basically people with relatively small, have such a huge amount of fraud. That is a system failure. CMS and Medicare, which sadly or happily fall under your purview, have in fact built a system that is rampant with fraud. And I'll just briefly remind the committee of something that our committee was very proud of. During the spending of the stimulus, we had authorized the RAT board and the oversight that went on. And what we discovered was that it wasn't very expensive, a few $1,000,000, to set up a team that, in fact, was able to find, for example, doctors in Kansas who suddenly made new applications to have offices in Los Angeles and then proceeded to send large amounts of billing to Medicare. The system that they put in place looked through the data, saw it as a red flag, discovering that it was an improbability that so many doctors would suddenly be in L.A., they did two things. They called the doctor's offices, and before they got past the receptionist, they were very quickly put to the doctor, who was immediately available to say, heck no, I don't go to California and I'm not there. They did the second thing, which is they went to Google Earth and they looked at the building that was being applied for, and they quickly saw that it was a strip mall with no appropriate space for medical offices. They flagged it in real time and very quickly were able to get to a fraud before large disbursements went out. That is proven technology that cost a fraction of what a portion of the budget that deals with fraud at the IRS spends. With the passage of the Data Act, with the help of the ranking member, many of the procedures are in place and sit at Treasury today. These are leverageable technologies that are not about how much money. They are about a willingness to employ them. Money may be needed to scale, but that money certainly would be easy to justify if, in fact, the tools were used. So what I am hoping to hear today is not a request for more money, but it is a statement, hopefully both DOD and IRS, about how you can use modern technology to work smarter, not harder. If there are systems that need to be in place or changes, hopefully you will be proactive in suggesting them. But I think what, Ms. Davis, you have done a few of these before, so this isn't new work for you. Doing these reports year after year and seeing the numbers substantially similar, 100 billion, 100 billion, 100 billion, and pretty soon it's heading toward $1 trillion, tells us that they have a system failure. And, Commissioner, I know you understand that it takes system changes to make large changes, tens or 20s of billions of dollars in changes. Simply plussing up the number of people to do the same work will get you at best a incremental increase and very hard to quantify as worth the taxpayers' money. So, again, I've used my 5 minutes. I've used it to say that I'm hoping this hearing will very much be about the proactive system changes that the largest single areas of improper payments in our government are sitting before us today, the Department of Defense and the IRS. Under their offices. So, Mr. Connolly, I want to thank you. This is an important hearing. This is one of those hearings that the committee does that is always the same no matter which party sits in the chair. And I thank the Chairman and yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Issa, and I will recognize Ranking Member Connolly.
I thank you both, Chairman. And Chairman Issa makes a good point. This can't be all about money. Money isn't everything. When it comes to resources for fulfilling our missions. On the other hand, money is not nothing. And this Congress has certainly taken the precept that money isn't everything to a very logical but harmful conclusion, especially when it comes to resources for the IRS. But I remember Ms. Davis, the head of GAO, testifying about the lack of resources at GAO and how there is a return on investment. When we invest in investigative and audit functions, the recovery rate is fairly high. Likewise, when we invest in collection rates and investigative resources for the IRS, there is a return on that investment, which I will return to in just a little bit. I think it's important to keep both in mind. Money is not the solution to everything, but that isn't the argument for stripping bare the resources so that we can't really do or can't perform our mission and our function. I want to thank Chairman Mica especially for holding this hearing. As the Chairman Issa said, actually this subject has been the purview of this committee for a long time, and we did some really, I thought, thoughtful and groundbreaking work under Todd Platt, who was a previous subcommittee chairman of this committee, because this is something where it seems to me we can find bipartisan common ground. We're not going to agree on everything, but I think actually we might agree certainly on the goals we want to set for ourselves. It's important to know the Federal Government's reduced the reported government-wide improper payment rate by 35% over the last 4 years, down from 5.42% in fiscal 2009 to 3.53% in fiscal 2013. That tells me the Federal Government's taking this issue seriously, and I think this committee can take some credit for that. However, Federal agency improper payment estimates still add up to at least $106 billion a year as of last year, which is, as the Chairman said and the Chairman of the subcommittee said, unacceptable by any standard. And when I think about the magnitude of that, when we talk about numbers involving sequestration over a 10-year period, or debt reduction plans, or the big deal, this one item is over $1 trillion in a 10-year time horizon, and probably more. So the payoff for whittling it down is really important, and it's something I'm glad the Federal Government is taking seriously, but we need to make more progress. Despite the imposing magnitude of the problem, I'm confident we can bring the figure under control because, as the Chairman showed in that chart, 5 programs account for $82.9 billion, or 78% of the amount we're talking about. So it's not something so scattered over thousands of agencies and divisions that it's going to be hard to get our arms around. Actually, what the chart the subcommittee chairman put up there really kind of gives us the scope of the problem, which means it is something manageable. While no silver bullet exists, a targeted approach to me on those concentrated areas I think could have high payoff. Further, having examined the issue in depth, I'm also convinced that when it comes to combating improper payments, we'd be wise to take heed of Ben Franklin, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Antiquated pay and chase approaches that seek to recover improper overpayments after the fact are labor-intensive, time-consuming, and are going to have diminishing returns. And finally, successfully bolstering the Federal Government's ability to prevent improper payments requires 2 to tango. And Congress itself is not off the hook. As Deputy Director Cobert's written testimony notes, there is compelling evidence that investments in administrative resources can significantly decrease the rate of improper payments. From the Social Security Administration saving taxpayers an estimated $9 in avoided improper payments for every dollar spent on disability review, to the Health Care Fraud and Abuse Control Program, recovering $8.10 for every dollar spent on health care fraud and abuse investigations over the past 3 years. It's indisputable to me that investing taxpayer dollars wisely, maybe even modestly, into administrative resources can significantly reduce this deficit and yield to much better results. And yet, when members seek to offset amendments in Appropriations Acts, it's invariably these same valuable administrative tools that are the first in line for the guillotine. As Commissioner Koskinen can attest, Congress's penny-wise and pound-foolish approach sometimes to management is not limited to improper payments. Consider the Independent National Taxpayers Advocate 2013 annual report that said for every dollar appropriated to the IRS in fiscal 2013, the IRS collected an astounding $255 in legally owed taxes. In fact, the amount of tax money probably left on the table every year uncollected but properly owed far exceeds the dollar amount ascribed to improper payments. If the Chief Executive Officer of a Fortune 500 company were told that each dollar he or she allocated to his or her company's accounts receivable department could generate many multiples of dollars in return, it's awfully difficult to see how a corporate board would allow that CEO to escape that investment. However, the revulsion sometimes expressed for the IRS here in Congress is so deeply ingrained culturally that since 2010, we've relinquished a golden opportunity to strengthen enforcement of our laws, to catch tax cheats, and reduce the deficit by a substantial amount of money. By my rough back-of-the-envelope calculation, we're talking well over $3 trillion potentially on the table over a 10-year period. That's a very significant chunk of money. So I believe that investments make a difference. And I would also add one other thing, Mr. Chairman, that sometimes gets overlooked because we focus so much on the IRS. But one of the partners here for CMS and IRS, when we look at Medicare and Medicaid fraud, is the U.S. Attorney's Office. Last year, for example, the Boston U.S. Attorney's Office, if I got my numbers right, helped identify and recover $3.5 billion in Medicare fraud. That's one U.S. Attorney office. There are 99. So working with the Department of Justice is also important. We need the U.S. Attorney in every office across the United States to take this issue of fraud and waste seriously and make it a priority, because when we have their support and their active machinery at work, Commissioner Koskinen has a very powerful ally in trying to undertake his mission. So I think that's an important part of this, too, that we want to keep in mind. With that, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to the testimony of our friends at the panel, and I thank you so much for holding this hearing.
Mr. Meadows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll keep my remarks very brief. I'm looking forward to hearing from each one of you, but to give your staff really some prep time, what I would ask each of you is you can satisfy the ranking member, Mr. Conley, and myself, if you can quantitatively give, if we invest more money, where it's actually going to provide a return. Now, Mr. Koskinen, I read your testimony, and I got your return on investment, and as a business guy, that's what I look for, is a return on investment. But I can tell you that I looked at the details in terms of money spent, number of employees with regards to the Earned Income Tax Credit, and I see no correlation between employees and money in terms of recoupment. And so I look forward to you answering in a quantitative, and that's what I'm looking for each one of you, really a matrix. If we invest another $1 billion, what will we see in terms of reducing this number? Because it is systemic. It is not a new problem. And honestly, as Mr. Conley said, when we're dealing with these kind of numbers, $106 billion, eventually it adds up to real money. And so I look forward to hearing from each one of you, and I'll yield the balance of my time back to the Chairman.
Well, thank you, and thank you for yielding to me for just a second to just put a couple of things in the record. Now, first of all, this is one of the smallest subcommittees in Congress. We have a very limited, just over.
Mr. Chairman, I would say most efficient.
Yeah, but, well, it's smallest in numbers, but let me just say that the savings from this subcommittee are substantial. I just, you know, I heard this about this commentary that just give us more money. The Chairman Issa talked about that. I asked them to pull the report that we did in January of this year on just conference spending. This is on IRS. And I just don't tell these agencies to come in here and give them a hard time and not expect some results. But in conference spending alone, and through the work of our subcommittee, we reduced expenditures in IRS from 2010 to 12, 87% in conference spending. They went from $37.6 million in FY10 to 4.9 after we hammered them, again, about excess. I have no problem with people going to conferences. I represent one of the best conference areas in the world, Orlando, and some great deals. But the spending was out of control, and you can save money. So whether it's improper payments, then I just pull the improper payments. Now, something's rotten in Denmark, and something sure as hell is rotten in Washington. If you go from 2008 back to 2004, you've got totals of improper payments, $38 billion, up to 2008, 73. Most of them in the 30s, low 40s. And then you jump from 2009 to last year, 106, 116. These are $1 billion. I just was doing quick math when we finished that. Again, over $500 billion in 5 years, and a relatively small amount. So something has got to be done to get this under control, period. And we passed laws, and something's not happening. I cited at least 4 laws that we passed. So this hearing, or as many hearings as we have, we're going to figure out a way to stem this. And the ranking member just said, over a 10-year period, trillions of dollars. You could balance the federal budget just by some of this. Excuse me for getting a little bit intense about this, but this is serious, and we're going to follow it through. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Could I also just ask unanimous consent?
I ask unanimous consent to put to, that was what I started with, both this little chart is not identified, but it's the rate from 2013 to 9, and then 4 to 8 on improper payments without objection, so ordered.
If you'd put that on the record.
And the improper payments 2013 chart in the record without objection.
And Mr. Chairman, to be fair to the IRS, I want to note the 4 primary legislative requests are not for money. They're actually for expanded authorities, and they list them here, and I would just ask that we enter that into the record. I want to be fair. I was talking about more resources, not the IRS. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And without objection, those items will also be noted in the record at this point. Okay, there being no further opening statements, and members will have 7 days to submit opening statements for the record, members that are not here. We may be joined by some other members. There's, I think, at least 1 classified or possibly 2 member briefings going on simultaneously, so without objection, so ordered. Now, I would like to first introduce our panel of witnesses. We have first Ms. Beryl Davis is the Director for Financial Management and Assurance at the Government Accountability Office. Ms. Beth Colbert is Deputy Director for Management at the Office of Management and Budget. Mr. Mark Easton is Deputy Chief Financial Officer at the Department of State. Mr. Shantanu Agrawal is Deputy Administrator and Director of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Center for Program Integrity. And Mr. John Koskinen is the Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. Some of you have been here before, some of you have not. This is an investigative panel. We do swear in all of our witnesses. If you'll stand, please. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give before this subcommittee of Congress is the whole truth and nothing but the truth? And all of the witnesses, the record will reflect, have answered in the affirmative. Have a seat. Again, you're welcome. And first, I will recognize, and again, those who haven't been here, we try to limit you, not exactly, but we try to keep it close to 5 minutes. If you have written testimony, additional data, through request of the Chair, it will be included in the record. So with that, let's recognize and start off with Ms. Beryl Davis, Director of Financial Management and Assurance at Government Accountability Office. Welcome, and you're recognized.
Chairman Mica, Ranking Member Connolly, Chairman Issa, and Mr. Meadows, I am pleased to be here today to discuss the issue of improper payments in federal programs. My testimony will focus on federal agencies' reported estimates of improper payments, remaining challenges in meeting requirements to estimate and report improper payments, and strategies for reducing improper payments. In fiscal year 2013, federal agency estimated improper payments totaled nearly $106 billion. This estimate was attributable to 84 programs spread among 18 agencies. The 5 programs with the highest dollar amounts accounted for almost $83 billion, or 78% of the government-wide total. This same year, OMB reported a government-wide improper payment error rate of 3.5% of total program outlays when including DoD's Defense Finance and Accounting Service Commercial Pay Program. However, in May 2013, GAO reported major deficiencies in DoD's process for estimating improper payments for this program in fiscal year 2012. Consequently, the 2013 estimate may not be reliable. When excluding the DFAS commercial pay program, the reported government-wide error rate was 4% in 2013 compared to a revised estimate of 4.3% the year before. In fiscal year 2013, federal agencies reported improper payment error rates for 7 risk-susceptible programs that exceeded 10%. These 7 programs accounted for more than 50% of the government-wide estimate. Federal agencies have continued to identify new programs as risk-susceptible and report improper payment amounts. A net of 10 additional programs were added by OMB in the 2013 government-wide estimate when compared to the prior year. The most notable addition was the Department of Education's direct loan program with an estimate of approximately $1.1 billion. Despite progress in reporting improper payments in GAO's fiscal year 2013 audit of the financial report of the United States government, we reported the issue of improper payments as a material weakness in internal control because the federal government is unable to determine the full extent to which improper payments occur and reasonably assure that appropriate actions are taken to reduce them. We found that 4 federal agencies have not yet reported estimates for 4 risk-susceptible programs. For example, HHS has cited statutory limitations for its state-administered Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, which kept it from requiring state assistance in developing an improper payment estimate. In addition, 2 programs that did report estimates were not included in the government-wide total because their estimation methodologies were not approved by OMB. As GAO has previously reported, there are a number of strategies that can help agencies to reduce improper payments, including analyzing the root causes of improper payments and designing and implementing effective preventive and detective controls. Regarding root causes, identifying and analyzing the root causes of improper payments is key to developing corrective actions. While some agencies reported the causes of improper payments last year in 3 general categories as required by OMB, more robust root cause analysis may help to identify needed corrective actions and thus assist in developing and implementing effective preventive controls. Regarding preventive controls, strong preventive controls serve as the front-line defense against improper payments. This can increase public confidence and avoid the pay-and-chase aspects of recovering improper payments. Preventive controls involve a variety of activities such as upfront validation of eligibility through data shared among agencies. One example of such data sharing is agencies' use of the Do Not Pay initiative. Other preventive controls include predictive analytic technologies to identify patterns of high risk for fraudulent activities, program design reviews and refinements, and training programs for providers, staff, and beneficiaries. Finally, regarding detective controls, agencies need effective detection techniques to quickly identify and recover improper payments that do occur. Detection techniques include data mining and recovery auditing. For example, in fiscal year 2013, the Medicare Fee-for-Service Recovery Audit Program reported recovering $3.7 billion. Another area for further exploration is the broader use of incentives for states to implement effective preventive and detection controls in state-administered programs. Designed and implemented effectively, these strategies could help advance the federal government's efforts to reduce improper payments. Chairman Mica, Ranking Member Connolly, Chairman Issa, and Mr. Meadows, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. This completes my prepared statement, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, and we'll have questions when we've heard from all the witnesses. Recognized now Ms. Beth Colbert, and she is the Deputy Director for Management at OMB. Welcome, and you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Mica, Ranking Member Connolly, Mr. Meadows, for inviting me today to discuss the federal government's efforts to stop improper payments. I appreciate the opportunity to update the subcommittee on this topic. When the President took office in 2009, improper payment rates were on the rise, with the fiscal year 2009 rate coming in at 5.42%, the highest figure to date. We are pleased to report that since 2009, the administration, working together with Congress, has significantly reduced improper payments. As a result of this concerted effort, the government-wide improper payment rate has dropped steadily for 4 consecutive years, from 5.42% in FY 2009 to 3.53% in FY 2013. And as noted, the FY 2013 measure does include DoD commercial payments. Over the past year, we reduced improper payment rates in major program areas, including Medicaid, Medicare Advantage Part C, unemployment insurance, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, Pell Grants, and the Social Security Supplemental Security Income Program and the Retirement Survivors and Disability Income Program. Furthermore, agencies recovered more than $22 billion in overpayments through payment recapture audits and other methods. In programs administered at the state and at the local level, the Federal Government has been working directly with states to ensure that appropriate corrective actions are put in place to reduce improper payments. In other instances, Federal agencies have implemented innovative techniques to ensure that benefit payments are accurate. For example, the Supplemental Security Income Program has been integrating the Access to Financial Institutions AFI bank verification process. AFI electronically verifies bank account balances with financial institutions, so SSI can ensure that beneficiaries do not exceed program asset thresholds. While we are pleased to see progress, we acknowledge that more work needs to be done. There are areas where we did not see progress in FY 2013. For these and for all areas, we will continue to work closely with agencies to find the root causes of improper payments and address them. To build on our progress, we are working on a number of fronts. We are conducting a careful analysis of program-specific corrective actions to identify those with the highest return on investment or potential for substantially reducing improper payments. We are also focused on leveraging technology and sharing data to address improper payments, as exemplified by the Do Not Pay initiative. Do Not Pay uses data matching and predictive analytics to prevent improper payments before they occur. The budget includes proposals to build on congressional and administrative action to further reduce improper payments. The FY 2015 budget includes a number of program integrity proposals aimed at improving government efficiency, which is a core focus of the overall President's management agenda. For example, the budget strengthens Medicare, Medicaid, and the Children's Health Insurance Program by providing tools and funding to fight fraud, waste, and abuse. It also supports the Internal Revenue Service efforts aimed at improving enforcement of current tax laws and reducing the tax gap. These proposals will provide additional savings for the government and taxpayers and will support government-wide efforts to improve the management and oversight of Federal resources. There is compelling evidence that investments in program integrity can significantly decrease the rate of improper payments and recoup many times their initial investments. As was noted earlier, for every dollar spent by the SSA on disability reviews, the government saves an estimated $9 in avoided benefit payments. To help bolster the value of the Do Not Pay system, the President's FY 2015 budget reproposes providing the Treasury Do Not Pay system access to the SSA full death master file, which includes the most timely information available on death information received from state sources. We look forward to continuing to work with Congress on other measures, including the Improper Payments Agency Cooperation Enhancement Act, IPACE, which includes many administration priorities on sharing data to prevent improper payments. I'd like to close by emphasizing that stopping improper payments remains a priority for this administration. We have taken an aggressive approach to attacking waste, fraud, and abuse within Federal agencies, and we will continue to seek out new and innovative tools to help us in this fight. While we are proud of the progress we have made, we know there is much more work to be done to improve the accuracy and integrity of Federal payments. I look forward to continuing to work with this subcommittee and other committees, as well as the GAO, the Inspectors General community, and agencies to make more strides in reducing improper payments. All of these stakeholders are our partners in this endeavor, and they all play a critical role in holding the Federal Government accountable for reducing improper payments. Thank you for inviting me to testify. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, and I'll now recognize Mr. Mark Easton. He's the Deputy Chief Financial Officer at the Department of Defense.
Thank you. Chairman Mica, Ranking Member Connolly, Congressman Meadows, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the actions the Department of Defense is taking to reduce improper payments and achieve full compliance with IPERA. I submitted a statement for the record and will summarize it briefly. As the Deputy Chief Financial Officer of DoD, I am responsible for financial policy, systems compliance, internal controls governing the financial and accounting aspects of all business operations across the Department. I am proud to have served in the Department for over 40 years, both in uniform and as a civilian. I'm also very mindful of our stewardship responsibilities, and am keenly aware that the Department of Defense financial management remains on the GAO's high-risk list and that we are the only Federal agency without a positive financial audit opinion. I'm also convinced that this status will change over time and remain committed to our broader improvements in financial management, including improper payments. Most importantly, I should add that Secretary Hagel, Deputy Secretary Work, my new boss, and the Chief Financial Officer, Mike McCord, and other senior leaders throughout the Department are equally committed. In short, we feel we have a sound and active program in place to identify, report, eliminate, and if need be, recover improper payments. We estimate that less than 1% of all of our payments meet the definition of improper. That is low compared to the government-wide rate of a little over 3.5% for fiscal year 2013. And moreover, the nature of many of our improper payments allow us to resolve them quickly. Our record of minimal improper payments is particularly noteworthy considering the size and complexity of the Department's business operations. Consider that last year the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, or DFAS, handled nearly 90% of our total payments and dispersed nearly $580 billion, including 162 million pay transactions, 6 million travel payments, and nearly 10 million commercial invoices. Of course, there is always room for improvement. We constantly strive to reduce improper payment rates where we can cost-effectively do so. Our overall financial improvement and audit readiness effort, more commonly known as the FIRE plan, will continue to provide increased confidence and credibility in the numbers we report. These efforts, plus our collaboration with OMB, GAO, and the Congress, help us to sustain this focus. In my larger statement, I describe 5 broad categories of payments that we use as reporting elements. These are commercial payments to vendors, civilian and military payrolls, travel payments, retired and annuitant pay, and the similar payments by other organizations outside DFAS. I described our approach to controlling improper payments for each of them and will be happy to provide additional details this morning if you wish. Otherwise, they are part of the record. I have also provided an update on recent audit results from GAO and the DoD Inspector General, who provides an annual compliance assessment. Each report helps to identify additional opportunities to strengthen financial management and improve on our improper payment reduction program. Many of the issues and challenges highlighted in the reports are the same ones that affect our financial reporting and audit capabilities. We concur with those issues and recognize that until solved, they will continue to limit the confidence that you have in our efforts to accurately report improper payments. We also appreciate their recognition of the progress we are making. Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, I'd emphasize that we have a fundamentally sound improper payment program at DoD that minimizes improper payments to very small levels. Our more comprehensive efforts to improve financial information and meet financial reporting requirements and audit standards will also improve the efficiency of our improper payment efforts, as well as reinforce the completeness and credibility of our improper payment rates reported. It will further improve our attempts to minimize improper payments while also establishing an infrastructure that will greatly improve efficiency. Less than 2 weeks ago, Bob Hale, the DoD's longest-serving CFO, left office for a well-deserved retirement, but most importantly, he left a legacy that assigned a high priority to improving DoD financial management over the long term. Our current CFO, Undersecretary Mike McCord, is equally committed to improving the quality of our financial information and achieving auditability, and that includes full compliance with IPERA. Elimination of improper payments is and will continue to be an important and visible part of financial management stewardship at DoD. That completes my statement, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, and as I said, we'll hold them. Now let me introduce and welcome Dr. Shantanu Agrawal, is the Deputy Administrator and Director at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Center for Program Integrity. Welcome. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you. Chairman Mica, Ranking Member Connolly, Congressman Meadows, thank you for the invitation to discuss the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services efforts to reduce improper payments. CMS shares this subcommittee's commitment to protecting the Medicare Trust Fund and ensuring taxpayer dollars are spent on claims that are accurately paid. Each year, CMS estimates its Medicare fee-for-service improper payment rate using the Comprehensive Error Rate Testing, or CERT, process. In FY13, the Medicare fee-for-service improper payment rate was 10.1%. It's important to understand what improper payments are and what they are not. Like other large and complex federal programs, Medicare, Medicaid, and CHIP are susceptible to payment, billing, and coding errors. Improper payments do not always represent an unnecessary loss of funds. They are not also necessarily fraudulent, nor are they necessarily payments for services that should not have been provided. Improper payments can also represent either overpayments or underpayments on billed claims. Medicare fee-for-service improper payments can result from a variety of circumstances, including, first, services with no documentation, second, services with insufficient documentation, third, incorrectly coded claims, fourth, services provided that were not medically necessary, and five, any other errors, such as payments for non-covered services. The vast majority, over 60% of Medicare fee-for-service improper payments, are a result of insufficient documentation. For example, if an end-stage renal disease facility submitted a claim for 1 month of dialysis services for a beneficiary, but the submitted documentation did not include the physician's order for dialysis and medications as required by Medicare policy, the CERT program would score the claim as an improper payment. Another example would be if a physician submitted a claim for an office visit with a Medicare beneficiary, but the office visit note lacked enough identifying information about the beneficiary, the CERT program would score the claim as an improper payment. The factors contributing to improper payments are complex and vary from year to year. For example, the leading drivers of the improper payment rate in FY13 were hospital outpatient departments, skilled nursing facilities, and home health providers. A contributing factor to the fee-for-service error rate was the implementation of new home health policies requiring documentation of a face-to-face encounter prior to initiating home health services. This policy change will ultimately strengthen the integrity of the program. However, since it takes time for providers and suppliers to fully implement new policies, especially those with new documentation requirements, it's not unusual to see increases in error rates following implementation of otherwise warranted program integrity policies. CMS is committed to paying claims in an accurate and timely manner and has a comprehensive strategy in place to address the improper payment rate. First, CMS has put critical safeguards in place to make sure that only legitimate providers are enrolling in the Medicare program, to make sure we do not allow bad actors to bill the program and generate improper payments. The Affordable Care Act required CMS to screen all existing 1.5 million Medicare suppliers and providers under new risk-based procedures. Since March 25, 2011, more than 930,000 providers and suppliers have been subject to the new screening requirements. We have deactivated over 350,000 providers and suppliers and revoked over 20,000 providers and suppliers, meaning they are no longer able to bill the Medicare program. CMS has demonstrated that provider enrollment actions result in cost avoidance. For example, by revoking just 48 providers identified by our advanced predictive analytics technology, CMS prevented $81 million in improper payments. Second, CMS has designed its claim processing systems to detect anomalies in claims. For example, preventing payments for services such as a hysterectomy for a man or prostate exam for a woman. Medicare pays about 3.3 million fee-for-service claims each day. Due to the volume of claims processed by Medicare each day, CMS relies heavily on automated edits to identify inappropriate claims. The National Correct Coding Initiative stops claims like these that never should be paid in Medicare Part B and Medicaid. This program saved the Medicare program over $500 million in FY13 alone. Third, CMS develops medical review strategies using the improper payment data to ensure that we target the areas of highest risk and exposure. The review strategies range from issuing comparative billing reports that educate providers about their billing practices by showing the provider in comparison to his or her state and national peers, to targeted medical review of specific providers. Medical review resulted in $5.6 billion in savings for FY13. As required by law, CMS also uses other contractors to perform medical review on a primarily post-pay basis. These contractors have returned $3.7 billion in the same time period. Fourth, CMS is implementing prior authorization processes used by the private sector to prevent potential improper payments before they are made. To help address the high improper payment rate for power mobility devices, CMS implemented the Medicare prior authorization of power mobility device demonstration in 7 high-risk states and has announced plans to expand the demonstration to an additional 12 states. We are seeing real results from this demonstration. CMS is committed to paying claims in an accurate and timely manner and has a comprehensive strategy in place to address the improper payment rate. I look forward to answering this subcommittee's questions on how we can improve our commitment to ensuring the accuracy of payments made by CMS's programs.
Thank you, and we'll hear from our last witness, Mr. John Koskinen, and he is the IRS Commissioner. Welcome back, and you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Micah, Ranking Member Connolly, Congressman Meadows, for the opportunity to discuss the work being done by the IRS to reduce improper and erroneous payments in the programs we administer. These are important issues to the IRS, to which I have personally devoted substantial time. The IRS views improper and erroneous payments as a very serious problem, and one where we continue to devote a significant amount of time and resources. One of our major areas of focus is refund fraud, especially fraud caused by identity theft. I'm pleased to report that in this area, over the last couple of years, the IRS has made important progress. In 2013, we suspended or rejected 5.7 million suspicious returns worth more than $17.8 billion. Through the end of May of this year, more than 3.7 million suspicious returns have been suspended or rejected. We have also opened more than 800 new investigations into identity theft and refund fraud schemes thus far this year, bringing the total number of active cases to more than 1,900. Despite the progress, we realize that more needs to be done. Fighting refund fraud caused by identity theft is an ongoing battle for the IRS, as we must remain vigilant given the propensity of identity thieves to develop new and more complicated schemes. And even with the progress we've made so far, I've recently asked our senior leadership team to reevaluate everything we're doing in this area and to consider additional steps we could take related to refund fraud. For example, we are consolidating employees working on identity theft victims assistance across the agency into a single office. We will also be limiting to 3 the number of refunds that can be electronically deposited into a single bank account or debit card. We're also working to reduce improper payments by improving compliance with regard to refundable tax credits, particularly the Earned Income Tax Credit program. Our programs that focus on EITC combine to protect approximately $4 billion annually. But we are concerned that the improper payment rate for the EITC remains unacceptably high, along with the dollar volume of the payments that are made improperly. As noted, this problem has existed in a steady state for several years, and when I began as Commissioner, I advised our senior team that we need to make improvements in these rates. We again have pulled together what I call everybody who knows anything about EITC in the agency into a working group that is assessing all of our past and current efforts in this area and exploring new possibilities for improving the EITC. I view this as one of the most important areas of our activities. One thing we've already done is disaggregate the problem and see where most of the noncompliance is. We found that EITC errors fall into 3 main categories. The first involves claims for dependent children that people are not entitled to claim. The second is misreporting of income, and the third is improperly claiming the head of household or single filing status. We believe having made this more detailed background study about EITC enforcement problems will help us develop better compliance programs going forward. But, as Congressman Connolly noted, we've advised that we cannot do this alone. We need the help of Congress, which can greatly assist our efforts both on the EITC and on refund fraud by enacting several proposals in the Administration's fiscal 2015 budget. One would accelerate the due dates of third-party information returns, which would allow us to match these documents against income tax returns earlier in the filing process and allow us to more quickly spot errors and potential fraud. Another legislative proposal would provide the IRS with greater flexibility to address what are called correctable errors, which would allow us to automatically fix more errors on returns prior to paying the refund than we can do now. Now, if we see an error, the only way we can correct it is through an audit. We do on the average of 500,000 audits a year, but we're not going to be able to audit our way out of this problem. The Administration has also proposed expanding IRS access to information in the National Directory of New Hires to cover general tax administration purposes, which would include such things as data matching and verification of taxpayer claims during return processing. We would hope that Congress would enact these proposals to explicitly authorize us to regulate paid tax preparers as well. Given that more than half of returns for EITC refunds are done by paid preparers, this proposal would be an important addition to our efforts to improve compliance in the area. This is the first time we've pulled these legislative proposals together as a package. Some of them have been out for some time, but all of them would allow us to improve our ability to deal with EITC refund fraud. Even with those changes, which would be extremely helpful, a major challenge to our efforts to reduce improper payments remains our ongoing lack of resources. Without sufficient funding, our ability to proceed with any new initiatives in the area will be constrained. I agree with Congressman Meadows. I'm a believer, after 20 years in the private sector, in what do you get for what you pay. We've noted that with the President's proposed budget and increase in funding for the IRS of about $1.3 billion, we would produce back to you over $2 billion in enforcement revenues. Our estimate is that with the legislative proposals and the resources, we would protect an additional $4 billion in EITC improper payments from going out, and we would improve customer service levels, which we think this year are going to fall to 53%. With the budget resources, we would improve our taxpayer services to 80%. We stand behind those numbers and would be willing to be held accountable for them. I also have a prepared statement that I'm happy to submit for the record. We will continue to look forward to working with Congress to find a solution to the problems we face in the improper refund area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and without objection, your entire statement will be made part of the record. We'll now turn to questions, and actually I'll start first with the IRS Commissioner. Right now, about 25% of the earned income tax credit requests that are put into IRS are improperly paid. It's 24-point-something%. Is that correct?
That is the number.
Yeah. You outlined some measures spending some more money and also asking for some more authority. In the improper payments that we're talking about, we're not also including fraudulent returns.
They are included. In other words, part of the EITC problem are fraud by tax preparers, fraud by applicants. As I noted, one of the reasons we want to have authority to regulate tax preparers is
let
over
me
half
be
of the—
a little bit more specific then. We didn't include identity theft in that category,
No,
right?
Identity theft and the refund fraud generally are erroneous payments, but they're not categorized in the EITC improper payment category. But within the EITC area, the improper payments do include fraud as well as mistakes.
Have you had any outside consultants look at what's going on? I mean, this is a staggering rate. Nearly a quarter of all of these returns receive an improper payment for billions of dollars. Has there been someone that has looked at this and analyzed the sort of the errors of your way or audited to come up with suggestions? Is this an internal set of recommendations?
These are recommendations that are based on the experience we've had over the 8 to 10 years thus far, not very successfully dealing with this problem.
But again, I come from the private sector, and when you've got a, I couldn't function. I'd have to close down my business if I had a close to 25% error rate on payments. Almost any business would go out of business. The difference here is you have an unlimited resource, and that's taxpayer dollars. But has there been anyone outside that has been retained to look at this problem that you know of? And I know, John, you've only been there since the beginning of the year.
No, we've had a series of audits by the Inspector General, reviews by GAO. We not, to my knowledge, have had anyone outside of the agency actually look at this. But we've had, as I say, a lot of experience. The legislative proposals being pulled together result from, as I say, the working groups we've had over the last 6 months saying, if you needed, if we were a blank slate, what would it take to actually begin to attack the problem?
Let me ask you another question. Mr. Conley and I have done a lot of work on IT. He's actually done a lot more. About half of this, is it $84 billion they spend every year, is wasted. part of your detecting this fraud is also done through electronic means. Is that not correct?
That is correct. We have filters and analyses that we make. Exactly.
Well, something isn't catching a huge number. 25% is just off the charts. So, and it's a pretty technical operation. Again, you're looking at electronic review of these returns, and money going out in like water over Niagara Falls. But there's some disconnect.
Yes, and part of it is we identify.
Are you asking for more money for personnel or more money for technical equipment, or and what?
No. As I say,
what's the mix?
The mix is the amount of money we need for EITC fraud is relatively modest. We do need continued support, but it's a couple $100 million for the return review program that we've been trying to get.
But that's a technical improvement?
Yes, it's
software or something?
Software technical improvement would allow us to improve our things. But what we really need, we already
again, I think, again, I just don't believe that the solution that you're bringing to us is really going to do it.
Well, let me explain a little more, if I could. The correctable error authority would allow us, where we see an error in the refund, which is just legislative authority.
This is just legislative language. That costs nothing. We can pass that.
I'm saying, no, that's what my point is.
And I don't see a problem with those requests.
Right.
I'm talking about personnel versus the technical equipment that's, I mean, you can't possibly do these returns and some guy, with the spectacles looking at each.
Our view is exactly that there's no way for us to audit.
And you're saying that's a couple $100 million solution versus a multi-billion-dollar solution.
We already,
I don't have a problem there, but again, I don't have the greatest faith based on our most recent hearings in your technical capability as far as computers and data and all of that, and even retaining it. A simple question: how long do you keep the records, the electronic records on this data?
The electronic records for taxpayers are kept for years. We have some records for estates that go back 50 years.
Okay, and well, again, we've had our issues with emails and other communications. Records can go back to 50 years. These, you have pretty accurate information, and it's entered electronically.
Yes, we save each exam file. Every taxpayer record is saved separately. It's preserved, and those go back so that we can audit 3 to 6 years worth of returns.
Again, I am very skeptical about spending billions. I think it may take some money to upgrade software equipment and the technical equipment that will, help us reveal these fraudulent and also improper payments. But again, I have no problem. I think Mr. Conley and I would be glad to look at the other legislative remedies that we have.
Yeah, those are the significant parts.
I don't want to take too much time. A quick question for DOD. DOD, most people don't realize it, but I understand it's not till 2017 that you'll even be capable of an audit?
We will. The statutory requirement is to be audit-ready by 2017. By the end of 2017, we intend to go into full financial statement audits.
So I would have every reason to believe that some of the improper payment data that you're bringing forward is not totally correct or valid.
We stand behind the numbers that we report. The fact that that we don't have a clean financial opinion in the control environment that we have, we acknowledge why those numbers are not believable. People are skeptical. We have gone to great lengths to make sure that we've done as much as we can.
And your improper payments wouldn't include, we did a hearing here, I just about fell off the chair. There's a guy that got the contract in Amsterdam. He wasn't an American, remember that one? $800 million contract to supply fresh fruits and vegetables in, I think it was Afghanistan or one of the conflict areas. He milked that into almost a $5 billion improper payment. Does that include it, that kind of thing included here?
It depends on the circumstances, but I understand.
Well, that's a specific one. You go back
Yes,
and
sir.
look at that one. That one knocked me off my chair when I heard that, and there were questions raised about even his eligibility as a proper vendor. I mean, it was just astounding how he milked the taxpayer with an improper or fraudulent payment. I'd like a response from DOD on that one, because I just don't, again, all the information I have is your auditing capability is very limited. The information you have financially reporting to Congress is not what we can put our faith and trust in, and we still have a long way to go before we get the accurate information. With that, I'll yield to Mr. Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And actually, let me pick up on where you just were off. Mr. Easton, if you can't provide an unqualified audit until 2017, and we have reason, given the long history of the Pentagon, that you've got the biggest budget and often, therefore, you have the biggest problems, but the idea that you stand by your numbers makes many of us queasy on both sides of the aisle, frankly. I hope you won't stand too strongly behind your numbers, because there's every reason to believe you're understating your improper payments. Not deliberately, but given the fact that you really can't provide an unqualified audit until 2017. You want to comment?
There's a lot of reasons that make financial audit difficult in DOD, and I'm convinced that we're doing a lot right. There's clearly exceptions. The control environment, I think, will continue to improve. Next year, we will begin to conduct audits of our budgetary execution. When we have made changes, for example, GAO pointed out the statistical sampling for our commercial payments, and that's been raised before. We were using a sampling methodology that was not appropriate. We've made those adjustments. I think that the GAO's review in 2013 identified our statistical sampling as being accurate in other areas. And so we have reason to believe that the numbers are sound, but we certainly understand why the skepticism exists with the financial
in 2012, that same GAO noted that 2 of your programs were excluded from OMB's estimation of improper payments. Those 2 programs, the Defense Finance Accounting Service commercial pay and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers commercial pay, combined were worth $400 billion. Are they now included in the improper payments estimate?
Yes, they are included. They were included. I think that the decision GAO made is because of the statistical sampling anomalies that they found, which have been corrected, that they excluded them in their reporting calculation.
Right. But if we just simply applied, this is going back to Mr. Mica's point, if we simply applied, the rough rounded percentage of improper payments of the total, 4%, and $400 billion was excluded for those reasons, perhaps we were understating improper payments if it averaged out by $16 billion. You take the point.
Understand.
Okay. So I worry a little bit that we may actually be understating, not deliberately. I'm not one who's conspiracy-minded, but just because of the methodology and the lack of qualified data, and sometimes excluding it for those reasons, good reasons, but that means we're not actually getting the whole picture of improper payments. Dr. Agarwal, I mentioned in my opening statement about the role of U.S. attorneys, and my impression has been that when it comes to we understand Medicare fraud is a subset of improper payments. So when we talk improper payments, some of it's simple clerical error. Sometimes the data gets mixed up. We thought you were 66.5 and eligible for full Medicare or Social Security, and whoops, you're actually only 65, or whatever it may be. But given a big country and big numbers, that adds up. But in the case of Medicare, there is a subset of very substantial fraud, And I cited the Boston U.S. Attorney's Office, which I happen to know about, which I think was #1 in the country last year in uncovering fraud to the tune of, and prosecuting and pursuing, about $3.5 billion. Now, I think there are 99 U.S. attorneys in the United States. Is it your sense that every one of those U.S. attorneys is taking this issue seriously and is making it one of their priorities? Because if they are, our ability to whittle down this part of the improper payment could be considerable.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I couldn't comment on every U.S. Attorney's office, but I can tell you that OIG and DOJ are extremely focused on healthcare fraud, and we work very closely with them on investigating issues as well as taking action, initially administrative action on our end, and then law enforcement action on their end. And I think, for evidence of that, you just have to look at the HCFAC numbers that show an 8-to-1 ROI for all of the HCFAC funding. That really is a combination of both the administrative actions that I mentioned and all the law enforcement work that's conducted as well.
Okay. I would just plead with you, your office, and those in a position to exhort, continue to put the pressure on the U.S. attorneys, because, it's easy for somebody, they have a lot of independent authority, and they can set their own priorities. This needs to be one of them. And they're a powerful tool in helping us whittle down that number and, frankly, putting perpetrators where they belong, who are defrauding the U.S. taxpayer. Commissioner Koskinen, first of all, I want to clarify something, because I think it was a little confusing. Refund fraud that you cited, a subset of improper payments, or are you considering it a separate subject entirely?
It's a separate subject. We track it, we treat it seriously, but it's not treated as an improper payment per se.
Okay. If I can just stay on that, even though it's not actually the subject then of this hearing, given what you just said, but this committee has also dealt with this issue of refund fraud. And I seem to recall a few years ago somebody from IRS talking about the exponential growth in this category in just a brief 4-year period. If I heard you correctly, we're now talking about you setting aside suspicious returns to the tune of millions a year.
Yes, we stopped last year over $17 billion in suspicious refund claims.
Is this a relatively recent phenomenon?
It exploded really in 2009 to 2012, started in Florida, Georgia, and oddly enough, the District of Columbia. But Florida was really the epicenter of it, and it was overwhelming law enforcement. It overwhelmed the IRS. More recently, in the last couple of years, we've made significant progress in dealing with it.
Yeah. And of course, if it happens, I have constituents this has happened to, and trying to recover the money they are legitimately owed once the fraud occurs is a very complicated process, isn't it?
It is. We've made progress there. It used to take almost a year to deal with an identity theft victim. We're now down to at about 120 days to resolve their accounts, and our backlog is down to about 120,000.
If the Chairman will indulge me in one last question.
No, and if I might, if you'd yield to me for a second. We were talking about the hearing that we held August 2nd, 2013, identity theft, tax fraud, and actually from FY 2011 to 2012, IRS saw a 78% increase in identity theft cases. Now listen to this. Taxpayer Advocate Service, which provides assistance to victims, has seen a 650% increase in cases from 2008 to 2012. We'll put that in the record. You cited that.
I thank the Chairman for his intervention, and as he knows, our committee, in another category of bipartisan identification of problems I hope we can do something about, this problem has been highlighted by this committee, and I appreciate Commissioner Koskinen's comment, because I can just tell you, and I know my colleagues, if you've had similar casework, the impact of this can range from very inconvenient to devastating, depending on the size and magnitude of the refund we're talking about and the financial circumstances of the family involved. So a very important issue, and unfortunately, because of technology, just growing exponentially. Willie Horton once said, I rob banks because that's where the money is. Well, today's version of that is I go after refunds because
I
That's
would
easy
simply
pickings.
stress that over the last 2 years, with the assistance of U.S. attorneys, interestingly enough, we've begun to make serious inroads into this. We have, as I say, cut the backlog down of identity theft. We're stopping more with technology. More filters are more effective. But we're basically, as somebody said, we've driven most of the amateurs out. We're dealing with organized crime here and around the world.
Yeah. Well, it's a growing problem, and I'm glad you highlighted it. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I don't wish to impose some. I just had one more question.
Go right ahead.
All right,
Yeah,
my
I took
colleagues.
extra time.
Okay. I thank my chairman. And my last question has to do with EITC. Mr. Koskinen, do you know the genesis of the Earned Income Tax Credit Program? That is to say, who thought it up?
Well, it's been historically supported on a bipartisan basis. My understanding is that President Reagan, for instance, maintained that it was his favorite job creation program, poverty program.
Yeah.
It helps the working poor. It encourages people to work.
That's exactly right. It was actually a conservative idea. It was not a liberal idea. And it was a good one because it's not only well-intentioned, but it's designed to end dependency and to get, but to help lift people out of poverty. But it's a complex program, is it not?
Yes. Part of the problem is every time somebody tinkers with it, it gets more complex in terms of which children count, where they live, who has a responsibility for them.
Who qualifies?
Part of the error rate is it's very complicated for preparers and taxpayers to even figure out what they're entitled to.
In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is 57% of the returns, the EITC returns filed, are actually prepared by tax return preparers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, that tells you a lot about the complexity. I mean, that wouldn't be happening if it were simple in determining eligibility.
And most of those preparers do a good job, but there's a significant amount of error rate and some of it intentional on the part of preparers, some of whom take the refunds for themselves.
If we're worried about improper payments, and we hear that statistic, it requires a tax preparer in 57% of the cases, or at least it's preferred or required, you have to ask yourself, well, what could go wrong with that? And, of course, the error rate is going to be high, even inadvertent.
Correct.
And I just wanted to stress that because this is a conservative idea that I think actually it does work, but it's full of complexity that leads to an unintended consequence, which is improper payments.
As I've said, when I started, I looked at the history and advised people that it's an unacceptable rate of payment, improper payments, an unacceptable rate of dollars out the door, and we need to do whatever we can to make a dent in it.
Thank you, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank my colleagues for their indulgence.
Well, thank you, Mr. Connolly. Mr. Koskinen, I can assure you that the late President Reagan will be doing backflips in his California tomb if and when he learns today of 25%, nearly 25% error rate in an IRS program which he championed, the Earned Income Tax Credit. With that, the gentleman from California,
Thank you, Mr.
Chairman of
Chairman.
the full committee, Mr. Eisen, I want you to check the tomb when you go out there.
Okay. Mr. Commissioner.
I want to second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
That was I don't know if you heard that. Were you here also?
I think you better read that one again. Once for the
Ronald
old
Reagan
slow.
was doing backflips in his tomb to find out that program that he championed, Earned Income Tax Credit, had a 25% error rate payment. And you weren't here either.
Nixon isn't that keen about what's happened with the EPA and OSHA either, so it happens.
The Commissioner informed the committee today that taxpayers will be happy to know they keep your records for as much as 50 years. They do have a little problem with 27 months on there.
That part I heard.
Employees, but
Although it's important to note Nixon had a lot more experience with the IRS than did President Reagan.
well, he's probably doing some backflips too out there in his.
I'd now ask unanimous consent my time be restored. Mr. Commissioner.
I yield to the Chairman.
We're having too much fun for the subject being so serious. I think I covered what I wanted to cover in the opening statement, and I want to touch a few areas, Commissioner, since you're here and it's an appropriate time. We've had two large dumps from the IRS in the targeting of conservatives that have occurred in the last few days, one on the 3rd of July I was in the air coming, so I didn't read them that day, and then more yesterday. Additionally, we've had a response from your office to my 15 or so questions with lots of subparts, and I want to just run through a couple of quick questions. Your letter, although partially responsive, didn't respond to most of the specifics, including names of individuals and so on. Are you going to be responding further to my interrogatory questions we gave you at the last hearing?
Yes, we will respond to those as quickly as we can. As I said in my letter to you, the Congress has asked the IG to do an investigation of all of this. He's asked us to give that a priority. So we're providing as much information to you as we can without interfering with that investigation. Right. But as he winds that up, which I hope will be soon, we plan to respond to all of those interrogatories.
Well, oddly enough, both of us have been working for 2 years, so concurrent working is part of it. And that brings to a specific, the producing of the backup tapes and so on that apparently are at TIGTA. Backup tapes, and we have experts in the audience from MIT and Ohio State that will tell us that backup tapes can be duplicated. We would ask that you go to TIGTA and essentially make backup tapes and deliver them to us so that we could concurrently work on them. Things which are unique and can't be moved, we would understand why they can only be in one place, but the others certainly we would expect. You know, for example, the BlackBerry could be difficult, but you can make a backup of a BlackBerry's contents and it can be restored to a new BlackBerry. So if you'd look into that, I'd appreciate it. I'm going to be brief. You know, it is 2 years into an investigation. You're the third commissioner since this thing got rolling, maybe fourth to a certain extent. And we find it interesting that on the 3rd of July, in the documents that were provided to us, we only learned of something, and Mr. Jordan is going to primarily ask some specific questions of you, but of the existence of a system called OCS. Are you familiar with that?
OTS, I may be, but I don't recognize the name.
OCS. OCS is your internal communications. It's a IRS chat. Maybe some of the people behind you could raise their hands and say they know about how, in fact, you have a system that circumvents email and allows you to talk to each other, sort of like an in-house text. Are you familiar with it?
No, I've never used it. I didn't know we had that.
Well, I'm going to let Mr. Jordan go through the series of questions. I really think it should deliver the time. I'm going to ask that the staff deliver the emails to you during the intervening questions, because I don't want you to be blindsided, but I want it to be very clear. Lois Lerner knew about that system. Lois Lerner asked and wanted to make sure that it wasn't being tracked and traced. And most importantly, your agency has had a subpoena that would have covered the delivery, the preservation and delivery of information on this alternate email system, and to our knowledge, we've received no discovery from it. So it's a serious concern. I'm going to ask for efficiency that they give you the documents, and then Mr. Jordan, after you've had a chance to look at them, will, and maybe let the people that are here with you be aware of them, because it is critical to us that we're only finding out on the 3rd of July, 2 years into an investigation, that in fact there's an entire another way to communicate that Lois Lerner very carefully wanted to make sure, just about the time that this whole thing erupted, she wanted to make sure that it wasn't tracking and that it was a way to talk between her colleagues.
As I said, I'm not familiar with OCS. All I can say, I've been assured numerous times that there's been a search through every system in the IRS to make sure we've provided you all the Lois Lerner emails we can find.
It's not email. You have another communication system, and it's one that the tracking is turned off, even though the default for the tracking is turned on. It's a Microsoft system that you have within your communication. And we are obviously opening a new track of wanting to know more details about that.
We'd be delighted to provide that.
Okay, I'll close quickly, because, like I said, I want you to have full understanding. I want Mr. Jordan to actually cover the point by point. Since we last were together, Lois Lerner's attorney has changed his position on Lois Lerner's compliance, and basically said that she printed out some but not all, and that he was misunderstood. in the case of printing out emails related to the Presidential Records Act. And again, this investigation is not about the President or about the Federal Records Act. It's about targeting of conservatives. To your knowledge, have you delivered the printed out copies of Lois Lerner's emails? And if so, how do we tell the difference between the ones she printed out that you took from a file and ones you recovered from somewhere else?
To the first question, I have asked that question myself some time ago, as whether there were hard copies, and I was told there were hard copies and they were all produced to you in the ordinary course of our production. I can't tell you whether all of her official records were printed out and are included in that or not. Your second question, I'm sorry.
Well, the second question is in fact a favor. In order for us to not look through what seem to be identical documents, and we can't tell which ones were printed out in hard copy and you took them and scanned them in to give us TIFFs, and which ones were in fact documents that you got from somewhere else, can you have your people give us either the Bates numbers or a duplicate copy of the files that were delivered that were specifically printed out by Lois Lerner in compliance with the Federal Records Act, so that we can separate the ones gotten from one source, which would have been Lois Lerner's compliance, and the others, because we have no way of knowing where you got which papers from.
I don't either, but we'd be happy to go back and determine that and send you up the details so you'll know which were found as hard copies and which were found as emails.
That would be very appreciated. I thank the Chairman, and I yield back.
Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Commissioner Koskinen, thank you for being here today. Again, you just testified before this committee on June 23rd about Lois Lerner's computer crash. After that hearing, Chairman Issa sent you a letter basically suggesting that you made false statements about whether Lois Lerner printed out her emails to comply with the Federal Records Act. He wrote, and I quote, "Ms. Lerner and the IRS are not being truthful about her lost emails in violations of Federal law. Although accusations of lying to Congress are common around here, they are very serious, and so I want to give you a chance to respond. At a previous hearing, you testified, and I quote, "My understanding is every employee is supposed to print records that are official records on hard copy and keep them," end of quote. And in fact, the Internal Revenue Manual, which sets forth the policies governing the Internal Revenue Service, has a section entitled Emails as Possible Federal Records. That section states, and I quote, "If you create or receive email messages during the course of your daily work, you are responsible for ensuring that you manage them properly. The Department's current email policy requires emails and attachments that meet the definition of a Federal record be added to the organization's files by printing them. So according to the manual, IRS employees were required to print out emails that qualified as Federal records. Is that right?"
That's correct. Go ahead.
Okay, in your testimony at our last hearing, you also said that Ms. Lerner, and I quote, "printed hard copy emails." Has the IRS provided those printed hard copy emails to Congress?
Yes, we have.
Oh, you have provided those. I'm curious as to why we're still inquiring about them. Today, Ms. Lerner's attorney issued a statement informing the committee that during her tenure at the IRS, Ms. Lerner did print some emails. His statement continues, "The facts are that Ms. Lerner did not destroy any records subject to the Federal Records Act. She did not cause the computer assigned to her to fail.
He's not on the same.
And she made every effort to recover the files on the computer. And, Mr. Chairman, I ask that this statement be placed in the hearing record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you,
Let me just
Mr.
do a quick
Chairman.
housekeeping
Sure.
thing. I'm sorry, Mr. Clay, because I failed to do this at the beginning. I ask unanimous consent that Mr. Clay, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Jordan, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. DeSantis, the gentleman from Florida, who are not on the subcommittee, be, without objection, be allowed to participate fully in the subcommittee proceedings. Without objection, so ordered. I didn't do that, and I apologize. And we have been joined by other members of the full committee, and we want to give them full access. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Commissioner, at our last hearing, when you discussed Ms. Lerner's computer crashing, you said this, and I quote, "I don't know whether anything that was lost was an official record or not." Is that correct?
That's correct.
But in Chairman Issa's letter to you, he claimed that you testified to something different. He wrote that you testified that Ms. Lerner fully maintained her official records pursuant to the Federal Records Act. And I cannot seem to find that statement. Was that your testimony?
No. As I said in my letter to the Chairman responding yesterday, I appreciated the opportunity to review the record. There's nothing in my statement that I would change, but if I can provide any clarification, I'm happy to do that. But I have not suggested any changes in my testimony in the record.
Thank you for that response. And before I conclude, I want to emphasize an important fact. Lois Lerner's hard drive crashed on June the 13th, 2011. 16 days later, on June the 29th, was the first time she was first informed that the IRS employees in Cincinnati were using inappropriate search terms, and that is according to Inspector General Russell George. Is that correct, Mr. Commissioner?
That's my understanding.
And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back, and I thank you for your indulgence.
Mr. Chairman? Just a unanimous consent request. Apropos this line of questioning, I would ask unanimous consent that John Koskinen's letter addressed to Chairman Issa dated July 8th be entered into the record.
Without objection.
I also would request that the statement by William W. Taylor issued today clarifying Ms. Lerner's printing out of emails, brief statement, be entered into the record.
Without objection.
I thank the Chairman.
Thank you. Let me recognize Mr. Meadows, the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Colbert, I'm going to come to you first because you were saying that we made great progress. I think you were saying you had a lower percentage in this administration. You've been able to cut this improper payments way down. Is that correct?
We have.
You went from 5.42% down to 3.53%. Is that your testimony?
That is correct.
All right. I'm a little troubled because it gives, if we talk percentages, it sounds a whole lot better than reality. And so I guess my question is, in terms of real dollars, I'm showing that we've really made no significant change, that in 2009, your percentage was $106 billion in improper payments. Would you agree with that?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, so the only reason the percentage came down is because we're spending more. So 106 as it relates to a higher number that we're spending, but we're still sending out $106 billion in terms of improper payments. Is that correct?
The figure last year was $106 billion in improper payments. $97 billion of that was the overpayment portion, yes.
Okay, and so, and that's exactly the number that it was in 2009, is that correct, in terms of total number?
I believe that's correct.
All right, so your testimony to say that we're making good progress and all of us should be excited, it doesn't really do anything to go to what Mr. Connolly said about $106 billion being real money.
We believe we take the responsibility to reduce both the percentage and the absolute dollars of improper payments very seriously.
Okay.
We believe that we need to continue to work on this issue. We're doing that actively.
But to say we're
want to
making
keep this
progress when we still are wasting $106 billion, don't you think that that is an inaccurate narrative?
We have made progress in reducing the percentage. We think that's important, and we think we need to continue to focus on both of these issues.
So I'm a numbers guy. So let's go back to 2008. What was the total in improper payments then?
I don't have the exact.
Well, I do, and that's why I asked the question. It was $73 billion. And so we had an increase of some $27 billion in a very short period of time between 2008 and 2009. What caused that in terms of improper payments?
So as you look at the improper payments, one of the ways we look at it is look at it program by program. Some programs, as we've discussed, have higher rates than others. Unemployment insurance, for example, has a higher rate than DOD commercial payments. So some of that is due to the change in mix. That still means we have to keep looking at each one of those program elements and say, what can we do to bring the level down and the percentage down?
All right. And so in terms of level, in terms of real numbers, most of these across, if you look at all the payments, most of them haven't really gone down other than unemployment insurance. It had a decrease, a significant decrease of improper payments of about $6 billion. Some have suggested is just because we've made it more inclusive in terms of being able to get those benefits. But how can we celebrate this in terms of improper payments when we're really not making any progress in terms of payments going to different people?
What we're trying to do when we go through each of these programs is to continue to say, as you said, how can we take specific actions to reduce improper payments from all different sources, to understand what's driving those, and to look at the underlying root causes in conjunction with the GAO, in conjunction with the IGs.
So do we give out bonuses based on people making progress on this?
We do hold senior officials in agencies. There's a senior accountable official for each program, identified as the person responsible for making progress on improper payments.
So those officials in those agencies where we didn't make progress shouldn't have gotten bonuses. Would you agree with that?
I believe that people need to be held accountable for program performance.
That's not the question I asked. So should they have gotten a bonus if they didn't perform, if this was one of the matrix of performance?
Their bonuses are based on the specifics of their performance plan.
Right. And so if they went the wrong ways, do you think they should have gotten bonuses? Your opinion, nobody else's, just your opinion. Should they have gotten a bonus?
I think they all are accountable.
Yes or no?
That's why they're there.
Just a yes or no.
You know, there's a.
Well, obviously, you think they should. All right. So let me go on a little bit further. Mr. Koskinen, what is your target this year for EITC in terms of where you believe that we should be percentage-wise? What is your target?
Pardon me. Our target this year is to make an improvement. If you look at
what's your number target?
right now, on the basis of what we're doing, unless we can change the way we're doing it, my concern is for the last 6 to 8 years, it's been at an unacceptable level. And one of the reasons we're asking for legislative support to change the way we deal with it is that, if, as I've told our executives, if we keep doing the same thing the same way, we should expect the same.
So you don't have a number?
So I do not have a better number.
All right. So let me ask you this question, if the Chair will indulge me, and I'll close with this. You have a law on the books, passed in 2002, amended in 2010, that says that you're required to have a target and you're required to publish it. And the Inspector General's report says that you haven't done it for the last 3 years, and obviously still today you're not doing it. So if you're not willing to follow the law in terms of what's already passed, how will a new law help you accomplish that?
Well, as I said earlier to your target, I expect if we don't have additional resources in terms of the legislative support, that our target will be, we're going to be right where we are.
But that's not what the law says.
The law says have a target. I will tell you that our target then has to assume that.
So when can we expect you to publish it? Because that's what the law says. So is there any justification for not following the law, Mr.
None
Koskinen?
at all. We will publish our target there. You're exactly right. There's no reason not to do that.
All right, I'll yield back.
I would simply stress.
Would my friend yield?
I'm out of time, but I'd be glad to yield if the chairman will.
Well, if we could operate under the Darrell Issa rules, you've got a lot of time. Could you yield?
I'll be glad to yield to the gentleman from Virginia.
I meant that in a loving way. I wonder if my friend would ask the same question of Ms. Davis from GAO that he put to Ms. Colbert, because I think he was making a very good point, is we have reason to believe we're understating the actual amount of improper payments. I just wonder if we could just give GAO an opportunity, if my friend would ask that question, since it's his time.
Consider it asked, Ms. Davis.
Okay. Thank you. As I mentioned in my testimony, the GAO, when it looked at the consolidated financial statements of the United States government, identified improper payments as material weakness in internal controls due to the fact that we, at this point in time, cannot estimate the full extent of improper payments first and then assure that there are actions, reasonable actions that are being taken to reduce them. I will make a point that while the goal is, of course, to reduce improper payments, and we did put forward some strategies to do that, there are instances, of course, where, in addition to the improper payment figure, is a good thing. To be specific, this past year, a net of 10 programs were added to the improper payment government-wide estimate. It was actually, I believe, about 12 programs that were added, and then 6 came off, and then there were 4 that were split. But in total, there was a net increase of improper, net increase of 10 programs that were added to the estimate of improper payments. So to the extent, the first point, as I made earlier, about knowing the extent of improper payments, that's a positive thing.
Thank you. Gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Koskinen, I have, I think, a simple question about the tape backups at the IRS. I think you testified earlier that the tape backups are recycled every 6 months. But at the time,
they're kept for 6 months, and then the tapes are put back into being recycled.
So the tapes are reused?
They are reused, yes. They're reused until they don't work.
So how long of a period is that? How many times can you reuse the tapes, and how long do they last?
I don't know.
Does the IRS still recycle tapes, overwrite them every 6 months as a policy?
No, ever since the start of the investigation and the release of the IG's report, all backup tapes have been saved. So we have the 6 months up to May of 2013 and everything since then.
Here's what confuses me, because I had a chance to talk to an expert in tape backups. And these tapes hydrolyze after about 6 years. In fact, they're not guaranteed. And the manufacturer doesn't advise you to recycle them. In fact, their admirable qualities are their storage density, transportability, and low cost, but not the length of time that you can keep data on them. So this expert was surprised that you are, at the IRS, recycling what is something that is so cheap that it's actually cheaper to use new material instead of recycling. Can you confirm that these tapes were recycled and not destroyed?
I can't tell you that off the top of my head, but I would be happy to be checked. I've been told some time ago when I first started being involved with this that the tapes were used and recycled, and they're recycled until they're no longer usable, and then they're disposed of. But with regard...
But when they're no longer usable, they fail, and the purpose is to prevent failure. So that's what confuses me.
I'd be happy to get you information about that.
So it's your understanding that these tapes were recycled for reasons of economy?
That's my understanding.
Not to cover, to make sure that there were never more than 6 months of data?
I never had any indication of that.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from Ohio.
I thank the gentleman. Commissioner Koskinen, 3 weeks ago in front of the Ways and Means Committee, you testified, we actually got on the screen here, Lois Lerner was not trying to destroy email. In fact, she was working very hard to restore her emails. Do you stand by that statement?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay, then I want to show you a few emails that you've had a chance to review now. We got these on July 3rd, 4 o'clock, and I want to show you 3 emails out of 15,000 that you dumped on us on July 3rd. Let's go first to this one. This is to Lois Lerner to Maria Hook. I had a question today about OCS, what the Chairman was asking you about earlier. I was cautioning folks about email and how we have had several occasions where Congress has asked for emails and there's been an electronic search for responsive emails. So we need to be cautious about what we say in emails, because Congress might get a hold of them. American people might actually find out what the IRS is doing. But then she closed, someone asked if OCS conversations were also searchable. Now, your response to the Chairman was you don't know anything about OCS. Is that true? You have no idea what this system is?
Correct.
It's our understanding, after our staff did some background work, that this is an intra-office instant messaging chat-type system that you have in place at the Internal Revenue Service. And this was followed up by a response from Ms. Hook, excuse me. So remember, Ms. Lerner says, I had a question about OCS. Then Ms. Hook responds back, OCS messages are not set to automatically save as the standard. You follow me, Mr. Koskinen?
Right along with you.
I appreciate it. And then, of course, the response from Ms. Lerner is perfect. So now I want to show you one more timeline, one more slide, and it's actually the timeline from the Inspector General. March 28, 2013, discussion draft report was issued to the IRS. And so here's what I see. Now, maybe you see something different, but this is what I see, and my guess is the American people see this. At our last hearing, we learned that on June 3, 2011, Chairman Camp sent a letter to the Internal Revenue Service saying, hey, we're concerned about what we think may be targeting of conservative groups. 10 days later, June 13, 2011, a bunch of computers mysteriously crash, including Lois Lerner's computer. Now we jump forward. March 28, 2013, the Inspector General gives the Internal Revenue Service the discussion draft report, his audit. And you all learn, well, you weren't there at the time, but the IRS learns, and specifically Ms. Lerner learns, that you've been caught with your hands in the cookie jar, and that, in fact, targeting was going on, and now the Inspector General knows it. And so 12 days later, we get this email exchange that we just went through, where Ms. Lerner says, wow, I know I've gotten rid of the emails when the computer crashed 2 years earlier, but I better double check on this intra-office instant messaging capability we have here at the Internal Revenue Service. And she says, perfect, when she learns that it's not traceable, not trackable, not stored. And so my question to you, I mean, we know Ms. Lerner's not being square with the American people. Remember, it was just 31 days after this email exchange right here. 31 days later, she went to a Bar Association speech here in town and told the whole world Washington had nothing to do with it. Even though she's trying to make sure her tracks are covered, she told the whole world Washington didn't have anything to do with it. It's a couple rogue agents, a couple line agents in Cincinnati. So we know she can't be trusted. But what I want to know is, why did it take us this long to get these emails? We've been after these for 6 months, and you dump them on us on July 3rd.
First of all,
have you ever seen this? Have you ever seen this stuff before?
No, and I don't see anything in here where Lois Lerner says, "Wow, I got rid of my earlier emails, and now I got to check on them."
I'm not saying that. I'm focusing on the pattern. I'm focusing on the pattern.
I'm sorry. You said for the record that Lois Lerner had written.
No, I didn't. I said Dave Kemp sent her a letter. 10 days later, her computer mysteriously crashes, and 7 other important people at the IRS. And then I'm saying, here's the pattern again. She learns that there's, the Inspector General is going to issue a report that says the IRS was, in fact, targeting conservative groups. And now, 12 days after that, she says, we better make sure this OCS system doesn't track anything, is not traceable, and Congress, and more importantly, the American people can't get access to what we were talking about.
Let me just interrupt a second. Mr. Massey's time has expired. I'm recognizing Mr. Jordan for his 5 minutes at this point.
Yeah, I don't see anything in here about Congress using the OCS system or not helping Congress. It says the recommendation is to treat the conversation as if it's been saved somewhere because it's possible that somebody else did it.
All right, fair enough. Let's look at the first sentence in each email. Lois Lerner says to Ms. Hoke, I had a question today about OCS. First sentence from Ms. Hoke says, OCS messages are not set to automatically save as the standard. Lois Lerner's response, perfect. That's what I see.
Well,
now here's the point.
Would my friend yield?
I'll be happy to yield here in a second.
I thank you.
Have you made these emails? Have you given these emails to the FBI?
We provide all of the emails we provide to all the investigators. So I'm assuming this went to all 6 investigators.
Well, now, just a couple weeks ago when I asked you, did you tell the FBI that when you knew that you had lost Lois Lerner's emails, you said you did not. But now you're saying you've sent this information to the FBI?
We send all of the For the tax writing committees, and the FBI has 6103 for that, we've sent 960,000 documents, and we've sent those to everybody doing an investigation, including the Justice
Have you or anyone at the IRS sat down with the FBI and talked to them about the lost emails of Lois Lerner and/or this email chain that we just discussed?
I have no understanding, not to my understanding.
You have not. You personally have not.
I have personally not.
The FBI has not talked to you about the lost emails of Lois Lerner.
They have not.
Has anyone at the Justice Department talked with you or anyone at the Internal Revenue Service about Lois Lerner's lost emails?
I don't know.
No. Well, have they? So the FBI has not talked to you, and you don't know if they talked to anyone in your agency about?
I have no idea whether the Justice Department has talked to anybody at the agency. They have not talked to me.
The Justice Department. So for the record, the FBI and the Justice Department have not talked to you about the lost Lois Lerner emails.
That's correct.
And they have not talked to you about this email exchange right here.
That's correct.
Okay.
Would my friend yield?
In just a second. Let me go to one other thing. One other thing we noticed on this email exchange between Ms. Lerner and Ms. Hook. It's copied to Nanette Downing. Do you know who Nanette Downing is?
I do not.
Do not? Well, we do. She's the head of the exams division at the Internal Revenue Service. Any idea why the person who's head of the exams division is getting copied on email that says we want to make sure that intra-office communications aren't tracked? I mean, particularly in light of the fact we also just learned in the past few weeks that Ms. Lerner was hoping Mr. Grassley, Senator Grassley, was going to be referred for an exam. Any idea why Nanette Downing is listed on this email exchange, Commissioner?
I have no idea why.
No idea?
None.
Okay. Has the FBI talked to Nanette Downing? Do you know that?
I do not know.
All right.
Would my friend yield?
I'd be happy to yield.
I thank my friend. I just want to point out, keeping that graphic up on the screen, we've got to be real careful about not taking things out of context. Lois Lerner's answer, perfect, is not to this lower box in red. It is to the last paragraph that says, my general recommendation, this is from Maria Hook, is to treat the conversation as if it could be or is being saved somewhere, as it is possible for either party or the conversation to retain the information.
After she said, I've already cautioned people about what they say in emails, after her computers crashed, after she's nervous about the OCS system and what we're going to say because it might be traceable and trackable, you expect us, and more importantly the American people, to believe that, perfect, now we know we need to save these. That is the most ridiculous interpretation. There is no one with any common sense who would reach that interpretation that my colleague reached. No one would reach that interpretation. But if you want to stick to it, God bless you.
Well, I would just say to my friend.
Notice the first line. This is what I said to the Commissioner.
I would just say to my.
I had a question today about OCS. Suddenly, here's how it plays out.
I would
no,
never.
No, it's my time. It's my time, Mr. Chairman. So suddenly, Lois Lerner learned,
all right,
wow, we've been
Mr.
caught.
Chairman, as a matter of personal privilege.
No, wait.
I would caution our colleague that he not characterize another member as ridiculous.
No, I didn't characterize you as ridiculous. I said it's a ridiculous interpretation. So notice the first sentence. I had a question about OCS. Here's what happened. March 28th, the IRS gets a heads up. The Inspector General caught him. Because we asked the Inspector General to do the audit, he caught him targeting conservative groups. And now Lois Lerner says, you know what? I better double check and make sure this intra-office instant messaging, that can't be traced, that can't be tracked. And all I want to know is why the Commissioner took 6 months to get us this information. We've been asking for this stuff forever. And Mr. Commissioner, is there anything, here's a good question. This one email where Lois Lerner says, perfect, is there any 6103 violation in that email? Why in the heck did it take us 6 months to get this email exchange? There is not one chance there's any 6103 information contained in these three emails, and yet that's what you hide behind. Oh, we got to check it off for 6103. There's no way. We could have had this 6 months ago when we first issued the subpoena when you took over, and we don't. And we're supposed to believe? We're supposed to believe she's saying, oh, perfect.
we're working our way through and have completed the production for Tax Writing Committee.
Yeah, so you give us this on July 3rd.
63,000.
4 o'clock, the day before a holiday is when you give us 15,000, we see them.
Right, and you're going to get more because the
let's hope we
committee's got 40,000. You got 23,000 more to go, 27,000 more to go, and I'm sure in those 27,000 there will be some other interesting email you'll have to read, and it won't be because we didn't give it to you in February. We're giving them to you as fast as we can. And it's a significant volume of evidence. As I say, it's almost 1 million pages of documents have gone to the Tax Writing Committee.
All I'm saying is there's no 6103 problem with these three, and we should have had them a long time ago. But because, whoa, Lois Lerner's talking about, be careful what you say in emails, make sure this OCS system's not traceable.
Remember,
6 months, we get them on July 3rd at 4 p.m. with 15,000 other documents.
If I could note for the record, our first request by the investigators was to go through the custodians with search terms that had to do with the determination process, not with the email process. Therefore, when we went through, we pulled them by subject matter, and the first emails—
That is simply not true. We asked Clearback last summer for every single— I asked Mr. Warfall in a committee hearing just like this, I want every single piece of correspondence Lois Lerner sent to anybody. We want all of them. So this has been over a year that we've been asking for.
And the priority of the prioritization was we would produce to you all the emails that had a subject matter having anything to do with the determination issue, which was the IG report. Those were the first emails we produced.
Yes.
Then we went back and searched to find all the other Lois Lerner emails, and they're coming forward. And you're going to get more. The tax writers have all 67,000. You'll get another 27,000, and I'm sure some of those will be interesting to people, but it's not because we delayed them. It's because that's the process we've had to produce them.
I thank the gentleman, and I think we have another member waiting, Mr. DeSantis, the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield some time to the gentleman from Ohio.
Here's the takeaway. 9 days after the IRS knows they're in trouble, Lois Lerner is trying to cover her tracks. That's why we got the email exchange here. She already knows her emails are gone because the computer crashed back in 2011, 10 days after Dave Camp asked about it. So 9 days after the IRS knows they're in trouble, she's trying to cover her tracks. 31 days after this email happens, she goes to a Bar Association speech and blames some good public servants in Cincinnati, says that's where the problem is. Lies to the American people. And we don't get that information after we've been asking for it for a year. And this guy tells us he hasn't even talked to the FBI. What kind of investigation is going on where the FBI won't even talk to the head of the agency that has this kind of stuff going on with their email exchange and won't talk to the agency that lost key evidence in an investigation that's about people's First Amendment rights being targeted? And we get these flippant answers from the commissioner. That's what just bothers. That's what bothers every single American, Mr. Chairman. With that, I would yield to my.
I wouldn't say
to my colleague.
I thank the gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Chairman, I must say I object to this badgering of a witness. Well, at least the witness is entitled to respond after having his comments characterized. And this is not the standard of the subcommittee you and I have set, Mr. Chairman.
Well,
characterizing members of Congress and abusing and badgering witnesses. That is not the standard this subcommittee
Mr. Chairman,
has set.
I did not mischaracterize my colleague. Okay. I characterized his interpretation as one that I don't think very many Americans are going to reach. I did not disparage my colleague. I have a great deal of respect for my colleague.
I would rule that, again, I don't think he disparaged the witness, but I think he spoke to, again,
I would just
a situation, and we do want all the members to be respectful of the witnesses. He is not under subpoena, and he came here voluntarily. And again, there are differences of opinion as to what occurred, and our job is to get to the facts.
I thank the Chair.
I appreciate that, but I would just
Did you want to respond, Mr.?
Yes, I would appreciate that. Thank you very much. My only response was to disagree with the characterization that my responses have been flippant. I've tried to be responsive in any way that I can, both in my previous hearings and now. I understand these are important matters, and any information we can provide, we will.
How is it responsive when you wait 2 months to tell the United States Congress that you lost Lois Lerner's emails? How is that responsive? That's what the American people want to know, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes.
And you did not tell the FBI you lost Lois Lerner's emails. How is that responsive? Tell me that.
Well, if I can, if
you waited you knew in April and you didn't tell us.
As I have testified to 2 previous long hearings, when we knew in April that there had been.
You knew in April, and you told us in June.
I told you in June, and the reason was because.
Why'd you wait 2 months?
Can I answer this question?
Yes, you can, and
Can I answer you? Can I answer? Thank you. As I testified in 2 previous hearings, when I learned about the situation in April and we began to collect the information of how many other emails could we reproduce, my judgment was at the time that we should produce and discover exactly what the full context of the situation was and report it.
Were you advised of that, Mr. Commissioner, advised to keep quiet?
I was absolutely not. Nobody's
Can we
advising
play the
us.
clip of your testimony in front of this committee last
So when you knew in April that you said you were going to give us all of it, you said to Mr. Cummings and myself, you give us all, you went and told political appointees at Treasury, didn't you?
I did not.
You did not?
I did not.
So who did you tell in April when you knew?
Who did I tell? I didn't tell anybody. I was advised. I had no one I was going to tell.
Okay, so you said you were advised, and now you're saying you were not advised.
I was advised. Sorry, it's a good question. I was advised by the people in the organization working on the production of documents, and I was advised.
So you were advised.
You asked me if I was advised not to say anything. I was not advised by anyone not to say anything. I was advised in that clip. I noted I was advised by our people doing the research.
Okay, but that's the thing. To us, that's a distinction without a difference, because we're looking for the truth, and your organization has not provided us with the truth in a timely fashion. What I'm seeing with Lois Lerner's emails is really a culture of obstruction at the IRS. I mean, for her to be worried right on the heels of this draft IG report that Congress may search her instant messages, ooh, perfect, the settings aren't like that, that is very, very troubling, because she wants to be able to conduct her operations according to her ideology without oversight from the American people on behalf of the Congress. So that is very, very troubling to me. And, she's copying Nanette Downing, who is the head of the exams department, which is very much troubling. So what you've told us last hearing, you said, hard drive crash, well, these things happen. The odds of that happening innocently right on the heels of Dave Camp's letter are astronomical, based on the hard drive failure rate you gave us, based on the fact that it was those 10 days right after Camp, and based on the fact that it was totally unrecoverable. They've recovered data from the Challenger explosion, from 9/11, so somehow Lois Lerner's emails was totally unrecoverable. So that is a coincidence of absolutely inexplicable proportions, and I think that's why the American people, 75%, do not believe the explanation that the IRS has provided. Let me ask you this. Why are we just now hearing about this OCS system? We've supposedly had the FBI investigating this for a year. No one at the IRS ever told the FBI that there were communications using this system? Why didn't anyone at the IRS ever tell the Congress that there were these? The subpoenas are written very broadly, and they would absolutely have included this, not simply the email. So what is the reason for withholding that from Congress?
You asked a lot of questions. If I could answer them. I have no information as to whether anybody told the FBI or not, or was interviewed by the FBI about the OCS system. So I have no basis of saying one way or the other, so I don't think it's fair to say nobody told them. We don't know whether anybody told them. Secondly, we've produced the information to you, and you now have, the tax writers have all 67,000 Lois Lerner emails. You will soon have.
With OCS, you've produced that?
And the OCS, as they noted at this point, first I've heard about it, I looked at this, says the OCS system, whatever it is, by itself does not get retained, but as it's noted, you should assume, Lois Lerner's advised you should assume that it's retained because it's easy to turn it into an email. And I would also note, I'm not here to defend Lois Lerner, I've never met her, but in terms of getting rid of emails, it should be noted there are 43,000 Lois Lerner emails from April of 2011 until May of 2013 that have been produced. So in terms of getting rid of emails, there were 43,000 that she didn't get rid of after the hard drive crash.
Well, but that number is meaningless. If there are critical emails that have not been produced, that have quote-unquote been destroyed, that means the American people aren't being given the whole truth, and I yield back.
Okay. Well, we finished one round. I have some additional questions, and I'll yield to other members. Well, we've gotten into a whole array of subjects. We started with a 25% error rate on payments, which is, I guess, the highest in government for earned income tax credits under IRS, and we've come around to some of the issues relating to the IRS probe. I had just read this Wall Street Journal article. I'd heard about it just a few minutes ago. It raises some questions with me. I guess the FBI began investigating, or at least told Congress June 11th, over a year ago, that they were conducting an IRS investigation. Has this been going on over a year? Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Yeah. And you came the end of last year, John.
It started on December 23rd.
Okay. And it said in January, the Justice Department assigned the IRS probe to an Obama donor, Barbara Bosserman, an attorney in the Civil Rights Division. So since January, basically since the time you took over IRS, she took over the investigation. So you have not had any conversation with Ms. Bosserman?
I've had no conversation with anybody at Justice about this investigation.
Or FBI?
Or the FBI. I've had actually no conversations with any of the staff investigators.
You see, I mean, this raises a lot of questions. Maybe some of them you don't know the answer to, but it's startling that a supposed investigation that's been going on for over a year, you're the new IRS commissioner sent in to clean up the mess, and in fact, you have not spoken to them. Is there any of your have any of your folks that have been involved in this? Can you name someone who has talked to the FBI?
I can't, but if the FBI
can you provide us with information as to who? I mean, there must be some record of some contact. This investigation supposedly has been going on since June 11th. Congress notified over a year ago. You came in. They haven't talked to you.
But they wouldn't talk to me because this investigation goes from 2009 to 2013.
Well, I know, but again, and you don't know who they've talked to, but can you provide us with who they talked to when? We're trying to figure out who knew what when, to quote the late Howard Baker. And some of the pieces to the puzzle don't fit. Again, it raises a lot of questions.
To the extent I'm able, I'm happy to see if we can provide you that information. I do know of them, having spent a lot of time with inspectors general my last time around in the government in the 1990s, that investigators sometimes are very hesitant to have their witness list known, the people that they've actually talked to who they're investigating. But to the extent that that information is available, I'm sure we can provide it to you.
Okay. It, again, raises some very serious questions. Back to the payments. We'll look at your legislative suggestions. Mr. Conley and I, maybe we can address those. Tell me physically, where do they process the earned income tax credit returns? Is that done around the country at one location?
No, it's basically we have processing plants all around the country, so it depends where you are. Yeah. And they come in just like regular returns.
And again, John, you've been around a long time. I just come from a business background. If I was losing 25% in improper payments, I would have someone come in and give me an analysis. There are a lot of good firms around. You have the ability to contract. I think, and asking for billions just doesn't cut it. I think you've got a technical and a software, electronic evaluation issue, and it's astounding the amount of money that's involved here, and again, the percentage of errors. But I think we need to get someone in there immediately, if not sooner, and see if that can't be corrected.
It would be helpful. As I say, we've had several GAO reviews, several Inspector General reviews over time, independently making recommendations.
And Mr. Conley and I have discussed, we held one hearing in August on identity theft-related tax fraud issues. We haven't gotten into a lot of that. We put some things in the record. But that doesn't seem to be clearing up the way it should. That's a
That one I think we're making more progress.
Well, again, the information we had last August, and that's why we'll hold another hearing
I'd be happy to come back and talk with you in more detail.
We will definitely have that.
As I've told our people, I think we have a good story on identity theft and refund fraud, and I have been unhappy, and I don't think we have a good story thus far on EITC improper payments. I think it's been there too long, at too high a level, and we need to actually, that's why I've asked people to go back to the drawing board and rethink everything we do in that area.
Well, I just came back from a week in the district, and I can tell you, Mr. IRS Commissioner, that there is a canyon of disbelief and lack of credibility the size of the Grand Canyon when it comes to the general public and IRS operations right now. It's huge, and people are not buying, again, some of the information that's been put out there. Let me yield to Mr. Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad we're returning to the subject matter of the hearing. Ms. Davis, I'm not sure I understood your answer to my question through Mr. Meadows. The suspicion up here is that probably the number we're using right now, $106 billion a year in improper payments, understates the extent of the problem. Given the fact that DOD does not yet have an unqualified audit, by definition their numbers could be squishy. Hopefully they're not, but they could be. Given the fact that Ms. Koskinen does not include refund fraud as an improper payment, even though in the case of Dr. Agarwal, Medicaid fraud is a subset of improper payments. So please elaborate, because we kind of have the impression we're understating the number, and I couldn't quite understand your answer, which seemed to be, no, it's pretty accurate. Did I misread you?
We have stated in our audit of the financial statements, the consolidated financial statements in the last fiscal year, that there's a material weakness in internal control government-wide because of the inability at this point in time to actually get a handle on the number, to actually determine the full extent of improper payments, and, of course, to ensure that appropriate actions are taken to reduce them. You know, there are so many facets in this. As you are aware, this coming year in 2014, the definition of significant improper payments is actually going to change. The rate is going down from 2.5% to 1.5%, and $10 million, or still, you know, the million as being the criteria. We think that there's a possibility, certainly, of additional programs being added as the requirements for addressing and assessing and identifying improper payments change. There are so many facets, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, the fact that additional programs are being recognized and are coming onto the government-wide estimate. That's positive in the respect that now additional estimates are being, you know, shown, identified, and therefore one would assume programs can take appropriate action now that they have identified these additional, you know, internal control issues related to improper payments and take actions to reduce them. So, you know, the bottom line is that we are, and the federal government in total is unable to really identify the amount, and as time progresses, we will see changes in that amount. It is important to note, I will say that, you know, that, and this has been mentioned before, but improper payments includes errors or insufficient documentation of errors. So it doesn't necessarily mean that money has been inappropriately spent.
Nor, that's right.
And also the total includes underpayments as well as overpayments. It's a very complicated issue. It's not simple.
Of course.
We'd like to see the numbers go down. We absolutely like to see the rate go down. That's very positive, positive aspect of the program.
Is it GAO's view that some infusion of targeted strategic resources could make a big difference?
You know, that's a difficult question to answer, but let me say that there are certain areas where, and I think that, you know, as the subcommittee has noted, there are certain areas that really need more attention. The health care areas, as was mentioned, you know, looking at the two Medicare programs and Medicaid, and actually if you add the prescription drug program, which is around 2.8, close to $3 billion, you're talking about $64 billion in improper payments. Over, you know, compared to the government-wide total of $106 billion. So you're talking about over 60% of the government-wide total, is attributable to this area. So to the extent that we can focus on areas, as learned through this discussion here today at the subcommittee, EITC has a very high rate, and what is of concern too is the fact that this rate has actually increased. It was a little under 23% last year. It's now 24%. But also one of the big healthcare programs, Medicare fee-for-service, that rate has gone up. It's now 10.1%. It used to be, I think, 8.5% the year before. So you're looking at, issues related to programs increasing their rates, which is something that needs to be addressed.
Well, but my question was not whether it needs to be addressed. We agree on that. I'm actually asking you to go out on a limb. Would targeted resources make a difference in GAO's opinion, or have you even looked at that? We can solve this problem without a dime extra. Is that your position?
I don't think we've done any work that could specifically address your question, and I would be hesitant for that reason to answer it specifically with a yes or no. But as you can see, because there are areas of concern that there needs to be attention. Now, whether that can be accomplished with existing resources or additional resources are needed, I would turn to the agencies to address specifically those questions.
Well, I would just respectfully say to you, Ms. Davis, that once in a while Congress actually looks to GAO to give recommendations, not just analysis of problems. And your own agency has been before this committee and testified as to the efficacy of additional resources for it. So if we are to assume that some more resources for some more investigators and auditors at GAO can really save us money, can help uncover problems that can make us more efficient and less wasteful, it might follow that these other agencies could benefit from that too. Not to say money is the answer, but as I said in my opening statement, you can't take the position that money is never the answer. I mean, sometimes targeted investments can really have big payoffs. And that's my point, and I look to the GAO someday to actually comment upon that in a meaningful way. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Meadows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me follow up a little bit on that in terms of numbers, Mr. Koskin, because I looked at the numbers, and I want to give you the resources to do the job that you need to do to get this 30%, 25%, whatever it is, under control. Right. I'm not convinced, and what I guess I need you to respond to, I'm not convinced that people or dollars make a difference. And the reason I say that is that in fiscal year 2010, when your budget was higher and your employees were higher, the improper payments were also higher. Can you explain how that would happen?
Actually, you probably have the numbers. When I looked at them over the last 6 to 8 years, what concerned me was the numbers have been more or less flat. So they've been the same, as you say, whether we had more people or not. And that's why when I asked people to go back to square one and meet with me several times to figure out what is it that we need to do, the focus came on the legislative issues, that we need more authority to be able to stop refunds earlier, that we see that otherwise to make those corrections we have to go out and do an audit, but each one is small enough that, as you say, my judgment and ours is that we can't audit our way out of this. We can't be tracking down each one. We've got to be able to, when we see the error against our other databases, be able to correct it right then, rather than send it out and then have to do an audit and track people down. So I do think the legislative changes, I think the taxpayer regulation will help. As noted, 57% of the returns are by tax preparers.
Okay, and I knew you were going to go there, and so let me ask you, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'll try not to be rude. I know you get interrupted a lot, so let me just, since you're going there, how is regulating preparers that want to abide by the law going to fix the fraud and those who really 30%, some of it is error, but we've had testimony from your predecessor that would indicate sometimes we had 1,000 payments going to one particular address, and you know that's accurate. And so how would additional regulators on preparers who are well-intentioned, maybe make an error, actually substantially reduce this? Because I read your testimony, and that one was like nails on the chalkboard to me.
It's a good question. The regulation is relatively straightforward. It requires basically passing a minimum competency test and taking continuing education. So for preparers—
Yeah, but that just, I mean, listen, I was in real estate business, and you know what?
Pass the basic course, you'll be there. And what it'll do—
But this is not about basics.
But what it'll do, is our judgment is, we won't, the fraudsters, the people who are actually out keeping the refunds—
But that's what this is really about, is fraudsters.
But it will allow, so the question is, if you're a taxpayer, how will you be able to distinguish if you're in a moderate income community, an immigrant community, or any community? What this will allow, you would get a certificate that said you've registered with the IRS, you've taken the courses, you've tried to become informed, and I suspect the fraudsters aren't going to do that. And so what it will do is it will allow taxpayers to be able to have a more basic—
So like a good housing seal of approval.
A good housing seal of approval.
All right, let me go on. I'm limited on time, but I'll listen to further discussion on that. Dr. Aguilar, I know that in a May 20th hearing, you were asked for some information from Mr. Chaffetz and Mr. Langford, and you were given a time to respond by by June 19th. And that was almost 3 weeks ago, and we've received nothing with regards to that response. Can we expect a response to their questions with regards to the Medicare mismanagement by the end of the week? Are you working on that?
We are working on it, and I'll check immediately after this to make sure that you get a response as soon as possible.
So what kind of time frame do you need?
I think a week or two would be great.
Okay, so in 2 weeks, no later than 2 weeks, we can have your response.
Sure.
All right, thank you. I want to also go back in my last remaining time, Mr. Koskin, since it's been illuminated that we have this record problem with this new system that we just found out about. That's not news to your staffers, is it, that they would have an internal communication that is not email? That is probably not even news to you. You may not have known the name, but you've certainly seen people communicating in your agency via a messaging system that is not email. Isn't that correct?
No, I have actually never—
You've never seen that?
No, I have not seen that in operation.
You've never seen anybody communicating in your
IRS,
agency?
I've never gotten anything that was—
Okay, well, you've got a couple of staffers. Have you guys seen that behind? I mean, have they seen it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes, they say they have. They've been there for a while.
It's like instant messaging. I mean, I know that—
I don't do instant messaging either, so I'm probably—
Yeah, you and me either. So, but let me tell you my concern is the OMB, and we've got Ms. Kober here today, gave guidance in 2012 to have a senior official, a special person within each agency to make sure that we have compliance with regards to records. Who's your senior person within the IRS or Treasury that you would have appointed according to that guidance?
There's a man whose last name I don't know who is in charge of the records. We have 2,000 information resource counselors.
That's not what it says, that you're to designate a senior agency official. So who is that?
I don't know his name, but there is one. Actually, he just wrote a letter to NARA. Maybe I have a copy of the letter. Hold on. No, I don't. But we just—
But when you found out the last hearing that you didn't comply with the laws, the federal records, did you go back to that person and say, you know what, you messed up?
No, actually, even before then, I've gone back and said, we have to have a better—
So you talked to him, you just don't know his name or her name?
I did not talk to him personally, but I do know that actually, ironically, I did go back and ask for more information, and it turned out when NARA did a review in 2011, we got a score of 93. When they did a review of our record management system in 2012, we got a score of 99. So I think it's—
So did it include those instant messages in that scoring?
I have no idea what—
Can we find out?
I'm sure.
Okay, I'll close with this, Mr. Chairman. We have been denied access, the Oversight Committee, to your senior official in terms of technology, the people that are providing all these documents. I can't imagine why, if you had nothing to hide, we would be denied access to those types of people. Can I have your commitment here today that you're willing to make them available for us to ask questions, both the majority and the minority?
Yes. As I said, we've told the IG we're not going to interfere with his but after
But that wouldn't interfere. Would you be willing to commit to the committee today that we can have access to those individuals to ask them questions, yes or no?
Yes, you've already had a
so
briefing
we
from an
can
IT
call them. You will identify them today
No,
and let us go ahead and start interviewing.
No, I should make it clear, and I thought I had made it clear, that we've agreed to the IG's request that we not do anything to interfere with his investigation.
But that's not what the IG didn't say that.
IG has asked us.
The IG asked you to cooperate. He didn't say to not provide information or cooperate with us, did he?
Yeah, the IG asked
I mean, we have information that would indicate he didn't say that.
What the IG asked us was to give priority to his investigation and not do anything that would interfere with it, including talking to anyone that he was going to be talking to. So we have not pursued. We have told him as soon as he finishes his investigation, we'll provide, and you can have discussions with anybody you would like. We will do that.
I'll yield back. I thank the patience of the Chair.
Okay.
From Missouri is recognized.
All right. It's Mr. Clay of Missouri, Mr. Chairman. You remember, you're thinking of Bill Gray, but
I apologize. I did that twice today, and I know you very well.
I know.
My head is in a different place. Thank you.
He is looking at the ranking member's hair as he looks by you. So.
The second time.
It always helps to have levity in here. Mr. Eastern, according to a 2012 GAO report, 2 DOD programs were excluded from OMB's estimation of government-wide improper payments amounts. These 2 programs, the Defense Finance and Accounting Service Commercial Pay and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Commercial Pay, spent nearly $400 billion in 2011. The reason for the exclusion was that those programs were still developing their estimating methodologies. In other words, that they didn't know how bad their improper payment problem was. Mr. Eastern, have they figured that out yet?
They did. And in fact, we did report both of the numbers for the commercial pay program and for the Army Corps of Engineers. The decision was apparently made to exclude the numbers that we reported because of questions about the statistical sampling estimation methodology. And there was one in place in both of those programs. Since then, the recommendation of the GAO, we've gone back and in both cases implemented a adequate, and we would welcome GAO to come back and validate that program for both of those.
Okay, so are these programs expenditures able to be included in the next OMB government-wide estimation?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. And I do understand that the DOD's estimating processes for these programs is different from methodologies it uses for other programs. Why is that the case?
In the case of the commercial pay program, that was the specific program that was identified by GAO. There was some concern about the variability of the payments. We can make very, very small payments to very, very large payments. And we were using, when we initiated the methodology, more of a simple statistical sampling methodology, and my understanding is that they recommended and we implemented a stratified sampling methodology. So that was the distinction.
Okay, and Ms. Colbert, could you comment on the estimation methodologies used for these 2 programs?
We've, in our oversight role, have worked with DOD and incorporated the feedback from GAO and believe that the sampling methodology, improved sampling methodology that Mr. Easton described is now a sound one. That's why we've included those numbers in this past year.
Okay, thank you. On another subject, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have spent a significant amount of time today focusing on whether or not Lois Lerner has tried to hide information from Congress. They have suggested that Ms. Lerner has done so by intentionally crashing her hard drive and by using an intra-office chat system at the IRS called OSC to avoid leaving records on email. I have just a few follow-up questions relating to this topic. One, Mr. Commissioner, does the IRS have a policy to withhold information from emails in order to obstruct congressional information?
No.
Is the IRS policy to comply fully with all congressional document requests and subpoenas?
It is.
Has the IRS been complying fully with all congressional document requests and subpoenas that it has received to date?
We are. It takes longer than people expect and longer than we would like. We spent about $18 million doing it, but we are doing our very best to be totally compliant.
And about how many documents have you supplied to Congress to date since you got there?
Tax writing committees overall have just a little less than 1 million documents. Since I've been here, we've probably provided 300,000 or 400,000 of those.
You think we're going to read all of that, Mr. Chairman? Are you aware of any IRS employee intentionally withholding information in order to obstruct any congressional information?
I am not.
And I thank you very much.
Would my friend yield?
If the Chairman would let me.
Oh, well, you have plenty of time. Go ahead.
Oh, yes, I do.
I thank the Chair. I thank the Chair, and I thank my friend. Is it my friend's understanding, my friend from Missouri, that with respect to the issue of did somebody deliberately crash their hard drive, maybe the inference to be drawn from that might be, well, it's otherwise a rare event in the IRS that a hard drive crashes. Is it my friend's understanding that at our previous full committee hearing, the statistic was 3,000 hard drives in IRS alone have crashed so far this year, with almost half the year still to go?
That is the testimony.
I think it's actually 2,000.
I thought we heard 3,000 in the testimony, but all right, 2,000. That means we're kind of on track to get somewhere shy of 4,000, is that correct? Hardly an unusual event? And was it further my friend's understanding from the testimony we received that one of the reasons for that is that a lot of the computers at IRS have not been updated according to industry standards? They're kind of old by technology standards.
And my friend from Virginia, and we know why that is, because in the past 4 years there have been dramatic cuts to the IRS budget, mostly initiated by this House and the appropriators who are responsible for that budget.
Right. And let me finally ask my friend, much has been made of the fact that apparently staffers of the IRS resorted to Gmail and GChat, and they actually used those private vehicles for official business. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you imagine if we applied the same standard here in Capitol Hill to our staff and ourselves? Perhaps it would be embarrassing information, but not necessarily, in fact, almost certainly not sinister. Would that be a fair characterization, my friend?
That would be fair, but I'm glad we have a firewall.
I thank my friend, and I thank the Chairman.
And I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for their little colloquy there. I'll go back and tell my folks that they can, I try to explain to them that they keep their records for 50 years, but they can't keep emails for 27 months of the employees. I talked about the credibility. Mr. Jordan.
I thank the Chairman. I'll just pick up where Mr. Clay was. It seems to me that the IRS had 3 duties here, and they breached all 3. First, they have a duty to preserve documents. We know they didn't do that. They didn't do that right. They had some 6-month tape that recycled, et cetera. They had a duty to produce the documents that we actually subpoenaed. They can't do that because they lost them. They didn't preserve them. And then they had a duty to disclose once they knew that they didn't preserve and couldn't produce. And they didn't do that in a timely fashion. So they had 3 duties. They breached all 3. And Mr. Meadows, I think, asked an important question. We want certain people to come in front of this committee and elaborate on the fact that they breached these 3 duties they had to the American taxpayers, the American citizenry. And they're saying they can't because the Inspector General told them they couldn't do it. So my question to you, Commissioner, is how is cooperating with Congress's investigation going to impede any Inspector General investigation?
My understanding, the concern of the Inspector General is that he is actually talking to everybody who knows anything about the email situation and the crash of the hard drive. He has asked us not to talk to any of those people, asked us to give priority to his investigation.
And you know what? We'd be happy to work around his schedule. If the Inspector General wants to interview one of the witnesses we want to interview and he wants to interview him at 10, we'll say, you know what, we'll do it at 12. You want to do it at 1, we'll do it at 3. We'll do it the next day. We're happy to work. What we want from you is a commitment for these people. Committee sent you a letter 3 weeks ago. Thomas Kane, Acting Deputy Associate Chief Counsel for Procurement and Administration. Will you commit to letting Mr. Kane come and talk to this committee and the American people?
I've said it when the Inspector General is done.
No. I mean soon. We want this to happen this month. We want.
I didn't ask.
This has been a year investigation, Mr. Commissioner. We want it to happen. You wait 2 months to tell us you lost emails. We want to get to the truth as quickly as possible. We got key witnesses: Thomas Kane, Lily Wilburn, Field Director, Information Technology Division. Will you commit to letting her come talk to us this month?
I am sure she's one of the people the Inspector General is going to talk to. I've told and talked with the Inspector General. As soon as he's done talking to a witness, we're happy to
why
have
does
him
that
come.
matter? What is the big deal? If the Inspector General wants to talk to him on Monday, we'll talk to him on Tuesday. If he wants to talk to him on Tuesday, we'll talk to him on Monday.
Because the big deal is everybody, at least
How about John McDougall, Senior Trial Counsel, Office of IRS Chief Counsel? Will you commit to letting us talk to him?
My answer is the same. As soon as the Inspector General completes his investigation.
How convenient. How long is that going to take? 2 months? 3 months? 1 year like the first audit took?
The Congress asked the Inspector General to do this investigation. The Inspector General is committed to doing it quickly. Everyone has been interested in an independent review, which in the Inspector General.
We're all fine with that, but there is no reason we can't run our investigation the same time he's running his.
The Inspector General has advised us he doesn't think that he can get an independent review of all this if other investigations.
Let me switch subjects here. I'm actually going to try to stay. I appreciate the Chair's leniency on the time earlier. Let me ask this. To your knowledge, have any of these instant messages, any OCA messages been turned over to Congress in the last year?
I assume any of them that is noted in the process there that were preserved as emails have all been turned over.
Have any that weren't preserved as emails been turned over to Congress? Do you know?
All I know about the system is what I see in the emails, and apparently if you don't save them, they don't exist.
That's a question we need to find out. Well, I mean, who knows? You're telling us there's still thousands of emails you have to get to us. So even if they've been turned into emails, they may not have been turned over to us. I'm asking, do you know if any OCS messages, whether in instant messaging form that are somehow preserved or put into emails, have they been turned over to us? And your response is you don't know.
I don't know, and we'll be happy to let you know.
And we'd like that information soon, not based on when the Inspector General tells us you can give it to us, but soon.
That information we'll give you soon.
Yeah, like tomorrow if you can get it. You got the guys back behind who use it. Go find some folks at the IRS who understand how quickly this works and get that to us. Mr. Chairman, a whole new system that this committee didn't know about, the American people didn't know about, we find out just a couple days ago exists, and we don't know whether we've got any of that information. That's the key point. And the fact that they also are saying we can't talk to witnesses is just unbelievable, but hopefully we can make that happen this month as well. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.